For a while lang po ah. For a while lang po ah. For a while lang po ah. For a while lang po ah.
The COVID-19 pandemic highlighted the critical role of laboratory testing in the field of medicine. These highly trained professionals work in hospitals and independent laboratories using sophisticated procedures and equipment. In the Philippines, the medical technology profession can be traced back to the period of Spanish occupation. In the late 16th century, the Spanish Empire had occupied Luzon and established Manila as their capital. Along with the Spanish occupiers came the members of religious orders, aiming to spread the Catholic faith to the archipelago. These various religious orders established hospitals for the poor and institutions of higher learning. In 1887, the Spanish colonial authorities established the Laboratorio Municipal de Manila for the laboratory examination of food, water, and clinical samples. It was the first laboratory in the country. One of the very well-known historical figures of the said laboratory was no other than the Philippine war hero, General Antonio Luna, who was employed in 1894 as a chemical expert. He pioneered in the environmental studies, water testing, and forensics in the Philippines. During the American occupation, the Philippines had its first most advanced laboratory, the Biology Laboratory of the Bureau of Science, built in 1904, which was used for the investigation of pathology and methods of diagnosing and combating human diseases. The Philippines was making inroads in the delivery of healthcare services. The advent of World War II, however, decimated the said advances. From the ashes of war, the remnants of the laboratory left by the United States Army started the seeds towards the modernization of the Philippine medical technology profession. Guided by the Filipino themselves, followed by the desire to uplift the profession and enhance its recognition, PAMET came into being in 1963, holding its very first annual convention in 1964. In just a short span of 5 years, its efforts paid off, with the Philippine Medical Technology Act enacted into law. By 1973, PAMET was officially recognized as the only accredited professional organization of registered medical technologists in the Philippines. So many illustrious names had added sheen and brilliance to the practice of the medical technology profession in the country. From pioneers like Dr. Pio de Roda and Dr. Prudencia Santa Ana, to the first PAMET president,
Wave Beats Music.
and to the successive PAMET presidents who rose to the challenge of their times, each working tirelessly as PAMET expands to other parts of the country through the formation of chapters in various provinces and locales. Professionalizing its ranks, introducing innovations to modernize the profession, lobbying the government to accord Filipino medical technologists the recognition and importance they deserve, positioning medical technologists as partners of health and hygiene of local communities,
Wave Beats Music.
raising the profile of medical technologists as among the best in the world. Today, the medical technologist has emerged as an indispensable pillar in the Philippine healthcare and a vital partner in sustaining the health of the different communities worldwide. This is the Philippine Association of Medical Technologists, PAMET. Proud to represent world-class Filipino, medical technologists.
O God, who by calling us to the vocation of a medical technologist, has placed upon us the obligation of being a constant help in the scientific care of the sick, grant us by Thy divine light a deep insight into the serious responsibilities of our task. By Thy divine wisdom, awaken in us a growing zeal and determination to increase our knowledge of how to search for the underlying causes of sickness and disease, how to recognize the evidence of physical changes, how to make important chemical analyses, and other valuable tests so helpful in caring for the sick. By the divine love, permit us in this way to share with those who directly care for the sick, that thus we may be constantly working through the eternal physician, Christ our Lord. Amen.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Bayang magiliw, dalas ng silanganan, alam ng puso, sa ditim mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, duyan ka ng magiting, sa mandulupig, di ka pasisigaw, sa dagat at bulok, sa simay at sa langit mamahal. Mahilag ang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang istak ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na naglilingin. Ang bituing at araw na kailan pang may magdidilim. Lupa ng araw na iwan ating pagsinta, buhay ay langit sa piling mo. Aming ligaya na kapay mga api, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Pamit Hymn.
From various lands, races, and places, with grateful hearts we raise our voices. This day to our beloved Planet, from whence unity and love cometh. We join together in brotherhood to live up to thine ideals we should. In fields of advancement and learning, our noble cause will be our bearing. Loyal and true we'll be to thee, beloved Planet. This we say for service to God and humanity. With joy we sing for thee till eternity. Loyal and true we'll be to thee, beloved Planet. This we say for service to God and humanity. With joy we sing for thee till
Our beloved National President, Mr. Romel Saceda, officers of the different PAMIT chapters, esteemed guests, colleagues, and friends who are joining us from all over the country, a pleasant and freezing Saturday morning to one and all. Ladies and gentlemen, research is utilized in countless ways in the profession of medical technology. The approach may vary from a medical technologist carrying out daily routine testing in the clinical laboratory, or perhaps to a molecular analyst who is sequencing the genome of new viral strains. But more formally, though, research can be defined as a systematic inquiry to describe, explain, predict, and control the observed phenomenon. But in general, here in our profession, a good lot of researches conducted in both medical technology and medical laboratory sciences revolve around quantitative methodologies because we love it when we are in control of most variables that play a role in the conduct of our studies. However, this morning, we will be learning how qualitative methodologies play a role in addressing the fundamental research questions in our ever growing and ever learning profession. Hello there once again. I'm Clive Ivan Mercado, and I will be your moderator for this morning's program entitled Qualitative Research for Medical Technology Professionals in the Clinical Laboratory. And to formally open this morning's event, please join me in welcoming the chair of the PAMIT Professional Development and Leadership Committee, Dr. Robert Manawis, for his opening remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm virtual round of applause, please. Hello there, Dr. Robert. Good morning.
Hello, Sir Clive. Thank you for bringing so much energy into our opening. And also, I would like to welcome all of our colleagues here who are joining us today. It's going to be a little bit different welcome remarks because I'm going to be using a PowerPoint, but I've chosen to do this to welcome our colleagues today to explain the premise of this series of events, Sir Clive, that we are doing. And so, you know, in 2016, PAMIT researchers, actually then led by Dr. Florento, our lead correspondent at the time, launched a competency survey among professional medical technologists here in the Philippines, and this was held during the 52nd annual convention. And the result was published in the PAMIT journal in 2018. We actually aimed to be able to evaluate the level of awareness of competencies and how our professional medical technologists rated their proficiencies in their conduct of their function. And we used as a conceptual framework the competency guidelines for public health for laboratory professionals as proposed by the CDC and the Association of Public Health Laboratories. And this was the conceptual framework from which we based the study on. And you can see here that there were 3 tiers of competencies that professional medical technologists could be assessed on. You will see that there is a specialized competency, and these are the specific specialization areas, the cross-cutting competencies, which could cover all ranges of functions in the clinical lab, and of course, the general competencies. And it was an astounding discovery because the study revealed that there was a very wide gap of understanding about competencies in the clinical laboratory. Only about 36% of the respondents actually had an aligned perspective of what we mean by competencies in the clinical laboratory, and about 91% set their own definitions and understanding of what competency is. And that's actually an astounding discovery. And it's significant because when we speak of competencies, we are referring really, according to the guidelines set by the CDC, we are referring to the essential knowledge, skills, and abilities that are critical to the effective and efficient performance of work of professional medical technologists, and they are readily observable and readily measurable. And therefore, we speak of key performance indicators. And another very important finding in this paper was that the respondents find that they had least competency in the areas of communication, management and leadership, workforce training, emergency management and response, informatics, and of course, the area of research. And so it is in light of these circumstances and demands and emerging needs in the practice of our profession that the Professional Development and Leadership Committee, of course, with the supervision of our president, Sir Romel Saceda, has been relentlessly conceptualizing and delivering retooling and upskilling tools through our webinars for our professional medical technologists for 2 consecutive years now. Last year, we focused our topics on specific laboratory management skills such as strategic human resource, operations management, marketing clinical laboratory services, and change management in light of the so many disruptions happening in the clinical laboratory intra and post-pandemic. And just this year, we opened the opportunity for the desire and the want to be able to involve in research through Professor Lerma Paris' talk together with Dr. Paris and Dr. Belisario. And that created a very strong push because they covered a very comprehensive line of introduction into research. And today, as you know, we have Dr. Hapan and Dr. Navidad to give us enlightenment, equipping, and retooling in the context of qualitative research. And so I'd like to mention, dear colleagues, that the hardworking members of the committee has always been there to serve. The members are Dr. Frida Hapan, Dr. Edilberto Manahan, Professor Lerma Paris, and myself. And you have met all of them because they have all been resource speakers here in our webinars. I say hardworking because the team has been endeavoring to provide you with all these well thought of and needs analysis based webinar topics for free. And I hope that you will take advantage of all these opportunities and exploit all fronts for growth and development while they are still being offered to you conveniently, because time will come when they will not be free anymore. Our philosophy lies on the concept that competency building is free. It is made available for those who are cognizant of the fact that they still have a lot to learn, hence would be willing to learn, and will tenaciously sacrifice in order to become a better professional. There is no secret to success after all. It is open and made available for all. So today, our dear colleagues, we give you qualitative research through our high caliber speakers and who are active researchers and research advocates themselves. Take as much learning as you can. Next month, we will end our research series with quantitative research. So we wish you all a very productive day today. Thank you for joining us. And I am now thanking in advance our noble speakers and all of the backend support we have from PAMET through Sir Oli and his team. You know, they've always been silent heroes there. Sir Ed and his team, Sir Clive for moderating this event. Thank you also to the Professional Development Committee for your meritorious service. So our dear colleagues in medical technology, welcome and God bless us all.
There you go. Thank you so much, Doc Robert, for that outstanding, very inspiring, and very scientific opening remarks. What a blazing way to start our program this morning. And overall, for me, it's the most perfect way to start a webinar, the most perfect way that, to start a webinar that covers research. This is my hands down definition of leadership by example in the flesh. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm virtual round of applause once again for Doc Robert. So at this point, I'm pretty sure that you are now very excited to know how qualitative research applies in the field of medical technology and medical laboratory science. Thus, without further ado, I would like to take this moment to formally introduce our first speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, she finished her Master of Science in Medical Technology in the University of Santo Tomas in 2004. Furthermore, she also completed her PhD in Education, major in Educational Management in the same university as summa cum laude way back 2013. She currently serves as the chair of the Technical Committee for Medical Technology Education and at the same time, the Assistant Dean of the Faculty of Pharmacy at the University of Santo Tomas. I'm pretty sure that her name rings a bell to a good lot of us because she authored and co-authored textbooks and manuals that we are currently using in our instructions in the academe. Our first speaker is the PAMIT Distinguished Service Awardee of 2021 and this year's recipient of the prestigious Most Outstanding Professional in Medical Technology Award. Ladies and gentlemen, our first speaker for this morning, Professor Maria Frida Z. Hapan, PhD. A warm virtual round of applause, please. Hello there, Prof. Hapan. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Sir Clyde, for that kind and warm and generous and energetic introduction. Good morning, everyone. May I please be allowed to share my screen? Is my audio clear?
Yes, Doc.
Thank you, Sir Clyde. Can you now see my presentation?
Yes, Doc. Crystal clear.
Thank you very much. So to our President, Sir Romel Saceda, RMT, MBA, to all our PAMIT officers and board directors, to our chapter presidents, to Dr. Robert Manawis and all members of the Professional Development and Leadership Committee, to our dear colleagues and friends and guests in attendance today, a pleasant and wonderful morning to all of you. My sharing for this morning is entitled, Not Everything That Counts Can Be Counted, Application of Qualitative Research in Medical Technology or Medical Laboratory Science. Here are our intended learning outcomes. After this presentation, we shall be able to differentiate qualitative research from quantitative research, discuss the most common research design under qualitative research, discuss phenomenology as a qualitative research design, and explain the process of doing phenomenological studies, which we hope would later on lead to doing phenomenological studies in your workplaces. I am here not because I claim to be an expert in qualitative research, but as someone who is willing to serve and share with passion my experience and my little knowledge in doing qualitative research, specifically phenomenology. I know that what I am about to share this morning is far from the usual hardcore topics or lectures that we are so used to in medical technology. But I hope that with this, we shall be able to appreciate the value of qualitative research as it provides a voice to the lived experience that allows us to gain deeper insights and understanding of the Lebenswelt, or the world as immediately or directly experienced in the subjectivity of everyday life, as sharply distinguished from the objective worlds of the sciences. This 1-hour presentation is actually a one-semester course in the graduate school. So please bear with me and let me begin this sharing with a short story. Once upon a time, there was a northern pike that was rather scary looking. It was feared by the small fish called minnows because it was a voracious and effective hunter feeding on the minnows. One day, a biologist caught the pike and placed it in a tank filled with water. The biologist then divided the tank into two by placing a glass panel in the middle. Thereupon, he placed some small fish called minnows in the tank. When the pike saw the minnows swimming freely inside the tank, it felt happy and thought it would be a feast. However, what the pike did not notice was the glass barrier in between its own part of the tank and the part filled with juicy prey. Every time the pike would launch itself at a tasty little fish, it would painfully crash into the glass barrier. Imagine how painful that could be. The pike kept on trying and kept having painful encounters with a glass barrier after many failed attempts, and presumably with a very sore snout, the pike gave up and ceased attacking the minnows. It had learned that attacking the minnows was futile and associated attacking the minnows with pain. By this time, the biologist pulled out the glass barrier between the pike and the minnows. Although there was now no glass barrier to stop the pike from eating the minnows, it would keep ignoring the fish, even though the minnows were swimming around him. Soon, the pike had nothing to eat, and eventually it died of starvation. Such an unfortunate thing to happen. When we exhibit a trained incapacity that comes from a rigid commitment to what was true in the past and a refusal to consider alternatives and different perspectives, we are suffering from what we call as the pike syndrome. Why this story about the pike? Let me share something about myself. I finished my master's degree way back in 2004, and after 2 years in 2006, I decided to take up a doctorate degree. But as we all know, way back then, there was no doctorate degree for medical technology, but we do have it now offered at the University of Santo Tomas, PhD, major in medical technology. And because I was already working as part of the academic staff in the University of Santo Tomas, in fact, actually as early as 1985, as a faculty member in the Department of Medical Technology, I decided to take up PhD in education, major in educational management. So from medical technology, which is considered as a hard science, I took up education, which is considered as a soft science. I dared cross this academic divide between hard science and soft science. So I am a product of both hard and soft sciences. Well, others may think that I have not gone where I was supposed to go, but I would like to believe that I have ended up where I wanted to be after considering alternatives and different perspectives. In medical technology, we are trained to rely on experimental, quantifiable data or scientific methods, focusing on accuracy and objectivity. In education, there's a different approach to the use of scientific methods, but we must not be like the pike, which refused to consider alternatives and new perspectives, hence it died of starvation. In my case, I explored the new possibilities that I found as a PhD in educational management graduate. To some, there will always be an academic divide between the hard and soft sciences. The East will never meet the West, so they say. So there's a difference, no? There's a difference between hard and soft sciences, but actually there should be no divide between these two sciences. In medical technology, we always love to count. I don't know if you will be able to do this, but I would love to see you putting in the chat box, the things that you would love to count. Sir Oli, will they be able to put in to use the chat box? Will
Yes,
our audience
the
be able
participants
to?
can type their answers to your queries through the chat box.
Okay, thank you very much.
Just select send to everyone.
So sorry, may I share my presentation again? All right? So there are things that we love to count. So what are the things? Ano po ba ang gustong-gusto nating bilangin? As medical technologists, we do complete blood count, we do sperm count, we do colony count. There are a lot of things that we love to count. And we are so into quantitative research process. And we are so very willing to undergo the tedious process, the tedious aspects of quantitative research. From identifying the problem, to literature review or reconnaissance, to conceptual framework, study design, sampling, instruments, undergoing research ethics, data collection, analysis, discussion, summary, and references, and conclusion. Not to mention the difficulty of finding the funding for quantitative researches. So there's some drawbacks in doing quantitative research, we must admit it, but this is not to discourage us in engaging into quantitative research, because we really, it's actually a must that we do research. So some of the drawbacks are it's difficult and expensive, it requires a lot of funding, it requires a lot of time to do. We need a large sample size. Some of my students, when they are doing their thesis, they are required by their statistician to come up with 1,000 respondents. It also requires extensive statistical analysis, very sophisticated methods, and sometimes because we come from a developing country, it might be difficult to publish, especially in international journals, because they have already the state-of-the-art methods, while we are still using methods that are already routine to them. All right, so if I may ask you, what do you see? Can somebody from the audience answer? What do you see? Okay, Sir Clive is seeing an old woman. What about the others? Okay, Mom City is seeing a girl. Some are seeing a young girl. Others are seeing an old woman. That's correct. You have a young girl here, and then when you take a look at it at another perspective, you are seeing an old woman. It is easy to see one or the other, but impossible to see neither. You will either see the old woman or the young girl. What about here in this image? What do you see? Anybody? What do we see in this image? Anyone? I'm waiting for your answer. Anyone from the audience? Can you see the image?
So according to most of our participants, Prof. Hapan, they are seeing an old couple and musicians.
All right. So there's an old couple that you see, and there's a middle-aged couple, and the man is playing his guitar. So it is easy to see one or the other, but impossible to see neither. And the last image, for the last image, what do you see? Dolphins. Okay, two people hugging. So some of you could very well see the dolphins. Others could see a couple embracing or hugging each other. So it is always easy to see one or the other, but impossible to see neither. Now, what am I trying to point out? Some of us could appreciate the power of quantitative research, while others would appreciate the power of qualitative research. So in my case, I am more into appreciating the power of qualitative research. And I would like to thank my advisor, Professor Dr. Alan B. de Guzman, for bringing me into the world or into the realm of qualitative research. So we can appreciate the power of quantitative research. Some of us can appreciate the power of qualitative research, but it will be impossible for us not to appreciate any one of these two research approaches. So either we're into quantitative or into qualitative, or sometimes we're into both. So when we talk about quantitative research, it is a type of research that is more objective in nature, deductive, it's generalizable. We can provide a general conclusion about our results, and we always deal with numbers. But in qualitative research is more subjective, it is inductive, it may not be generalizable, but what we can offer in qualitative research is what we call in the parlance of qualitative research as moderatum generalization, a modest type of generalization, which may be true about our selection, but may not be true for all, and which makes everyday life, everyday experiences possible. And qualitative research makes use of words. So these are some of the differences between quantitative and qualitative research. I mentioned already some of them, but I would like to highlight that for quantitative research, the procedures are standard and replication can be frequent. We can always replicate. And if we have done the correct thing based on standard procedures, then we get the same results. But for qualitative research, it's a different story. Research procedures are particular, and it will be very difficult to replicate. Even if you make use of the same data and you try to replicate it, you will be arriving at a different findings. By the way, in qualitative research, we refer to results as findings. So in summary, quantitative research is to generalize, while qualitative research is to describe and understand. It's a type of evaluation that is primarily descriptive and interpretive. It implies an emphasis on processes and meanings that are rigorously examined, but not measured in terms of quantity, in terms of amount, or in terms of frequency. It explores only a central phenomenon. There is only one key concept. Hence, you make use only of one central question. And when we try to answer these central questions and gather our data, we can ask participants, probably during an interview, broad general questions that will serve to address the central question. And we collect detailed views of participants in the form of words, in the form of images. We analyze and code the data for description and themes, and interpret the meaning of the information, drawing on personal reflections and past research, and then write the final report, excluding all personal biases and using a flexible structure. The focus is actually on human experience, and it is an approach that is holistic, recognizing that human experiences or human realities are actually complex. There are strengths, of course, involving qualitative research. Personally, qualitative research has led me to acquire a doctorate degree with minimal need for budget. And I was actually surprised, modesty aside, that during our graduation, I was standing in front of everyone delivering the address of thanks. So not to brag, but just to inspire you that there is also promise in qualitative research. I did 3 qualitative studies and 1 sanguinary climax or mixed method study in my entire dissertation. My dissertation is entitled, Can You Read My Mind? Understanding the Mindsets of Filipino Medical Technology Deans as Management Frameworks. So I take the opportunity once again to thank all the deans who have helped me. Somehow, when we have this goal, we cannot actually do it alone, but we need the help of other people. So in qualitative research, there is in-depth examination of phenomena. We make use of subjective information, and it's not actually rigidly limited to definable variables. We examine complex questions that may be impossible to examine using quantitative methods. We deal with value-laden questions, and we are able to explore a new area of research, thus enabling us to build new theories. However, there are also some drawbacks of qualitative research. For one, the subjectivity in us may lead to procedural problems. As I mentioned a while ago, replicability is difficult. There is always the danger of researcher bias, and there is a limit in the depth and comprehensive approach to data gathering. It's actually contrary to the belief of many that it is easier. It's actually labor intensive, and it's not actually appreciated well by classical researchers. Some may take a look at qualitative research as something that is cheap. Cheap in the sense that according to them or based on their thinking, it lacks rigor. But contrary to this, we can actually also observe rigor, validity, and reliability when we do qualitative research. So when do we do qualitative research? If we want to develop initial understanding of an issue or problem, or specifically a phenomenon, if we like to look for a range of ideas and feelings about something based on experiences, understand different perspectives, uncover underlying opinions and factors, and provide an opinion needed in order to support a quantitative study or to explain the findings from a quantitative study. We do qualitative research. So it is a type of research that puts premium or high value on people's thinking or point of view, conditioned by their personal traits or experiences. It's usually done in politics, economics, humanities, education, psychology, nursing, and all business-related subjects. But why not in medical technology? Why not in medical laboratory science? The power and promises of qualitative research is yet to be realized in the realm of medical laboratory science, and I am very happy that we have already started. Why? Because every human experience is a text to be read. Every human experience is a text that is worth reading. So qualitative research is just storytelling. Ito ay isang kwento na may kwenta. Hindi chismis. Kwentong may kwenta. The human experience has multiple layers of meaning. Multiple layers of meaning. There are several layers of meaning. And specifically in phenomenology, we only deal with one layer of human experience. It's very difficult to deal with many layers. We need to choose only or to select only one layer of human experience. I should say that the practice of medical technology or medical laboratory science is a form of human experience where we can find multiple layers of meaning. That's why our stories are worth reading. So in qualitative research, we should be able to identify whose experience, which layer of the experience, what central question to ask, and what research design to use. We should also be able to practice transcendental subjectivity, that is setting aside our own judgment, our own presuppositions, our own opinion with regards to the responses of our respondents. We should be able to do bracketing. So when we bracket, we remove all our biases. It's also known as phenomenological epoche. There are two pronunciations of epoche. The one is pronouncing the last syllable with a K, but I would rather pronounce it as epoche. So phenomenological epoche or bracketing. So in understanding a central phenomenon in qualitative research, we have only one, in contrast with the quantitative research, which deals with independent as well as dependent variables. So if we are doing qualitative research, we stay away from quantitative language because this might mislead our readers. It should not be a comparison. We should not be relating variables. We should not be proving hypotheses. We should not be measuring variables. We avoid words such as relate, influence, impact, effect, and cause. So you can readily determine that you are reading a qualitative paper if you do not find these words. We should be able to come up with good qualitative research questions. It should narrow the purpose. There is one central question that's the most general question that we would like to ask. And then there should be sub-questions dividing the central question into more specific topic questions, but they should be limited in number, about 5 to 7. So this is an example of a question. These should be open-ended questions. We avoid questions that are answerable by yes or no. Otherwise, for example, when we interview our respondents, they will just answer yes or no, and they will stop at that, and you will have a difficult time probing. It's proper to write open-ended questions, such as this. There are different types of qualitative data, and there are different tools of qualitative data gathering, which will be later on discussed by Professor Dr. Florence Navidad. So some of the types of qualitative data could be interviews, observations, or documents. So as I mentioned, interviews should deal with open-ended questions and should be able to probe, yield in-depth responses about people's experiences, opinions, perceptions, feelings, and knowledge. You know, my dear colleagues, when you interview, for example, for phenomenology, and the layer of human experience is something that is close to the emotion or to the heart of your interviewee, then you need not ask a lot of questions. Data will come pouring in. Yung simpleng sasabihin mo lang, kumusta po kayo nung merong surge ng COVID-19? Marami na silang maikikwento. At ang kwento ay may kwenta. And our data will consist of verbatim quotations with sufficient context to be interpretable. In fact, even the facial expression should be considered. The pauses, the laughter, the rise and fall of the intonation should also be considered when we do interview for our qualitative data gathering. We can also make use of observations, fieldwork descriptions of activities, behaviors, actions, interpersonal interactions, conversations, organizational or community processes. Some may also deal with the different memoranda. You can also study the different memoranda issued by your superior in the workplace. You can also analyze them. You can even analyze jingles or movies movies on leadership, if you are into leadership and management, and any other aspect of observable human experience. Data consists of field notes, which should be rich, which should be detailed descriptions of the human experience, and which should include context within the observations that were made. We can also make use of documents, as I mentioned earlier, yung mga memoranda, records, official publications, diaries, letters, even text messages. We can analyze and make use of this qualitative data. So what are qualitative research traditions or research designs? There are more than 20, but these are the most common: narrative research, phenomenology, ethnography, grounded theory, case study. But for this particular webinar, we shall be focusing only on phenomenology. But I made a table so that at a glance, we will be able to see the differences among these research traditions or research designs in qualitative approach. Okay, so for narrative, we focus on the life of an individual. We do primary interviews and documents. We can make use of stories, epiphanies, historical content, and we come up with a detailed picture of an individual's life experiences. In phenomenology, it's basically describing and understanding the essence of the human experience about a particular or specific phenomenon. It could be about success, it could be about struggles, it could be about leadership, it could be about mindset pertaining to human experience. And this would require long interviews with maybe up to 10 people, preferably audio recorded. And as I mentioned, we need to consider also everything. That's why during the pre-pandemic, we do the interview face-to-face, about 1.5 to 2 hours. But during the pandemic, we do it virtually, but we request our interviewees to have their video on. So we could see them, we could see their facial expression. We could see when they laugh, when they frown, because these are all included in the data gathering. So we analyze significant statements, we analyze codes, we analyze code meaning units, we come up with meaning themes in order to come up with the description of the experience. And the output should be a description of the essence of that particular phenomenon being investigated. Grounded theory develops a theory based from the data acquired in the field. It would require about 20 to 30 individuals in order to reach data saturation. And we make use of open coding, HL coding, selective coding, as well as conditional matrix to come up with a theory or a theoretical model of the human experience being investigated. Grounded theory involves a process. And for ethnography, it deals with describing and interpreting life experience based on cultural practices of social groups. So this now involves culture as well as social practices. And primarily it involves observations and interviews with additional artifacts during extended time in the field. So sometimes in ethnography, you have to immerse, you have to live with your respondents. And this would require description, analysis, and interpretation to come up with a description of the cultural behavior of a group or an individual. And then we have the case study. So for case study, we come up with an in-depth analysis of a single case or even multiple cases. And for this, we have multiple sources of data, including documents, archival records, interviews, observations, and even physical artifacts. We analyze by means of description, arriving at themes as well as assertions. And so we come up with an in-depth study of a case or cases. So in order to be able to select the proper research design or research tradition, we need to have an intent or focus. What do we really want to study? We need also to consider our audience, our skills, and our comfort level with the design or the structure that we are using. As I have said, for now, we shall be dealing only with phenomenology, that is surfacing the essence, the science of surfacing the essence of the phenomenon. My research advisor told me that if you know phenomenology, you can already easily do the rest of the research design. So what is phenomenology? It is examining an experience as it is subjectively lived. The Lebenswelt. It is the world as lived, where new meanings and appreciations can be developed to inform or even reorient how we understand life as lived based on our own experiences. As a research design, it can be positioned to help health profession, education scholars, or even practitioners to learn from the experiences of others. Because it's a form of qualitative research focusing on an individual's lived experiences within the world, it can be a powerful approach for inquiry. The nature of this methodology, however, is often intimidating to most researchers. Ano ba yung phenomenology? Parang ang hirap naman. I-pronounce pa lang, phenomenological, phenomenologizing. Hirap na. How much more if we are going to do it? So there are some sample questions here that you can ask, phenomenological questions that you can make use as a central question. It's just to describe the layer, a particular layer of human experience, such as fear. So you should ask, what is the experience of fear for medical technology frontliners? Or what does it mean to be a committed, sorry for the typo, a committed medical technologist? What is the medical technology student's experience of failure or high stakes examination? What is the essence of stigmatization among Filipino registered medical technologists at the height of the pandemic? Why is there a fast turnover rate in our workplace? Or what characterizes creative insubordination among clinical laboratory workers? There are a lot of questions that we can formulate, phenomenological questions that we can formulate in order to be able to deal with human experiences. So if we choose to make an interview in order to gather our data, we need to decide on our topic. We also need to have a grounding framework. In my case, for my dissertation, I made use of, because I'm studying the mindsets of Filipino medical technology deans, I made use of the managerial mindsets introduced by Gosling and Mintzberg. So the grounding framework will depend on your topic. Then we decide on our data gathering procedure. In my case, I made use of semi-structured one-on-one interview, which lasted for about 1.5 to 2 hours per interviewee. And then we decide whether it's individual, focus group, telephone, or email, or face-to-face, in-person interview. We create an interview protocol, which we call as the aid memoir or the interview guide. It will not be for the interviewee, but for you, for the researcher to serve as a guide so that there will be a continuous flow of conversation, of exchange of ideas. But as a researcher in phenomenology, you need to do a lot less of talking. You need to be able to listen and to listen well. And if possible, audio record your interview for purposes of transcribing ad verbatim the articulations as well as verbalizations of the respondents. So once we are able to collect the data, we call our significant statements. So we prepare the data for analysis. We get the significant statements. We group them together. Those that are similar will have to be grouped together. Ang sabi ko nga po dito sa aking mga advices, parang pagluluto lang yan. When you do the groupings of the significant statements, lahat ng ingredients ng pangsinigang, pagsama-samahin. Huwag samahan ng ingredients ng pangpinakbit kasi maliligaw yon. So dapat sama-sama. All similar statements together. When I say similar, they may not be necessarily the same, but they are similar. And we can only do this by reading, rereading, and rereading, and rereading our field text. So it's labor intensive. We need to have a general sense of the material. And once we have this, we start coding the data once they are already grouped together, and then we do the code meaning units. And after which, we assign them codes, which will eventually lead us to themes. Most of the qualitative researchers will follow the Qualitative method, which involves 7 steps. Reading and rereading descriptions in order to acquire general feeling for the experience, extracting significant statements in order to generate information pertaining to the phenomenon that you want to study. So you call the significant statements that would address your central question. We formulate meanings, code meanings and meaning units in order to illuminate meanings hidden in the various contexts of the phenomenon. And we categorize them into clusters of themes to identify what experiences are common to all. And then we start to describe. We write our findings. We describe the things. We describe the experience in order to generate a prototype of a theoretical model, which in the parlance of qualitative research is called research simulacrum. Sometimes there is a need for us to return to the participants in order to validate our findings, or to consult with somebody in the group to validate our findings, or to ask a friend about his or her own interpretation in order for us to be able to validate the findings. And then we incorporate any change based on the informant's feedback in order to present a theoretical model that comprehensively reflects the universal features of the phenomenon. And as I mentioned, we will be arriving only at a moderatum generalization, a modest type of generalization that may not be true for all, but may be conclusive or may be true about our respondents, and this will enable us to understand other people's human experiences. So I already mentioned this. So in short, what we do is phenomenological reduction. We phenomenologically reduce our data. Imagine from thousands and thousands and thousands of words in the field text that we gather, we reduce them into significant statements, later on into codes, and then into themes. It's ideal that we have only about 4 to 7 themes when we do the thematization. It would be very difficult for us if there are a lot of themes, because we need to, in our findings, we need to describe each and every theme. So in other words, we need to be lumpers rather than, it's good to be lumpers rather than splitters. So we lump those that are similar so that we arrive only at an ideal number of 4 to 7 themes. The themes are broad categories of information based on the codes that are grouped together. And they can describe a setting, they can describe what occurred, and they can also be related both chronologically or logically as presented in a grounded theory model. But relationship with the themes may not be necessary when we do phenomenology. So when we do phenomenology, we need to keep on probing. Kaya nga sabi nila soft science, we probe deeper so that we are able to see the noemata, the world as lived, which will later on, we become lit, no? We become lit, which will later on lead us to the light. Noemata is the object of the perception of thought, while noesis is the thinking process to detect the real meaning of an object itself, from being lit to the light itself. So in reporting our findings, we describe the setting, we describe our themes, and we need to write in detail. We are not allowed to moralize. We do not do moralizing here, but just describe the experience of our respondents as they shared, as they were articulated or verbalized. And we try to make the write-up as realistic as possible, noting the tensions, noting the contradictions, noting the facial expressions. So, as I mentioned, phenomenology is typically description, building toward the essence of the phenomenon. And for those of us who are thinking that there is no reliability or validity in terms of qualitative findings, well, we validate our findings based on 3 methods. Correspondence technique, that is, we verify from the actual respondents. We go back to our respondents to verify what we have written. And then we can also do member checking procedure wherein we verify with another person who is a member of the team, or a critical friend technique, which is asking somebody who is actually not a part of the study. We can also make use of triangulation. So sometimes we made use of other corpus or corpora of data in order to validate and to establish rigor in our research. We need to provide thick description. There should be thickness and depth of and breadth of data, breadth and depth of data. And there is a need to have an audit trail. We should be able to code, recode, and triangulate. And we need to practice, as I have said, transcendental subjectivity, removing our bias. We have to be a tabula rasa when we write the findings for qualitative research, because we need only to look into the experiences. It's the experiences of our respondents. So that's correspondence technique, member checking procedure, and critical friend technique, such that we arrive at a moderatum generalization, which according to Payne and Williams in 2005, is a modest, practical generalization based on personal experience that makes daily life possible through surveillance of order and consistency to social interactions. Is phenomenology valuable in healthcare practice? Can we do phenomenology in medical technology or medical laboratory science? What do you think, my dear colleagues? I hope that you will be able to embrace qualitative research, phenomenology in your everyday life, because in our workplace as medical technologists, as medical laboratory scientists, we have layers and layers of human experiences, which we can convert into a valuable research study. We can explore people's perceptions of the world, their beliefs, their attitudes and experiences, and conceptualize these in ways that can be meaningful and useful, because other people will always learn from the experiences of others. People always learn from the experiences of others. Just like in this study, which was published in Clinical Nursing Research, they dealt with the lived experiences of COVID-19 patients with pulmonary involvement and made use of hermeneutic phenomenology. This one, meron po palang Journal of Death and Dying, which dealt about brief trajectories of bereaved parents of adolescents and young adults with advanced cancer using the lens of phenomenology. And this is one of my articles which I was able to publish in the Asia Pacific Education Researcher, Understanding the Twists and Turns of Academic Deanship, a phenomenology of Filipino medical technology dean struggles as organizational managers. And another one on collaborative mindset entitled It Takes Two to Tango, Phenomenologizing the Collaborative Mindset of Filipino Medical Technology Deans, also published in the Asia Pacific Education Research. I also had one which was accepted in Educational Management, Administration, and Leadership. But a thought came into my mind that with these international journals, I might not be able to reach other medical technology schools in faraway places, and considering the fact that these journals are very expensive. And so I asked the permission of the journal and my advisor and instead submitted it to the Asia Pacific Journal of Medical Laboratory Science under the Philippine Association of Schools of Medical Technology and Public Health, where it will be read by a lot of our Filipino medical technology needs. Last PAMET Research Forum 2019, a group of clinical laboratory managers led by Ma'am Sanita did a study on leadership qualities of Filipino registered medical technologists working as laboratory managers. And they won first place in the PAMET Research Forum poster presentation. And at this point, please allow me to give this opportunity to a group, to my thesis advisees to share with you their study on the topic Survival of a Lifetime, Phenomenologizing the Lived Experiences of Filipino Registered Medical Technologists who Survived COVID-19. This study is dedicated to our modern heroes, to our Filipino medical technologists who braved COVID-19 and survived COVID-19. So at this point, may I call on my thesis advices led by Ms. Maika Nakulang. These are my references, by the way, and I would like to thank you very much for your kind attention. So take it away, Ms. Nakulanga's group.
Hello, good morning. May I have permission to share my screen?
Good morning, Jason. Let's give the technical committee a short while to assist you in your request.
Okay, thank you.
You may now share your screen, Ms. Flores.
Thank you, Ma'am Hapan. Good morning, dear PAMIT officials and Filipino registered medical technologists. We are the proponents from the Pontifical and Royal University of Santo Tomas, here to discuss our study entitled Survival of a Lifetime, Phenomenologizing the Lived Experiences of Filipino Registered Medical Technologists who Survived COVID-19. The primary center of interest of this study is to highlight the lived experiences and survival measures taken by these healthcare professionals. At this present time, it is significantly evident that these medical frontline workers are at high risk of acquiring COVID-19 disease, which is why to provide further groundbreaking analysis, the general concept of lived experiences in the study accounts for defining daily events and choices of an individual and understanding how those factors influence one's perception was added. While the concept of survival of these healthcare workers is a significant factor as it will shed light on the survival measures before, during, and after acquiring the disease. This topic is a matter of concern since medical technologies have confronted various issues that are not only limited to the possible dangers associated by day exposure to COVID-19, but the lack of study about the role, vulnerabilities, and health of these medical workers. Following that, the circumstances by these frontline workers necessitated the urgent need for the additional research regarding the adverse health impacts of medical technologies infected with COVID-19, which includes not only the physiological stressors, but also the psychological and emotional effects brought by the demands of their work. This study aims to answer the central focus: what typifies or characterizes the lived experiences of Filipino registered medical technologies who survived COVID-19. With this, it will pave the way for uncovering the multiple layers in the meaning of life of the respondents as they navigate the immense challenge of living with and being personally affected by the virus. The study opted to follow the schematic basis on the three-circle Venn diagram presented on the screen, the biopsychosocial model of health and illness, which was initially advanced by George Angel. According to the concept by Vogel 2015, disease and health are products of the relationship between three factors: biological, psychological, and social health. Wellness is defined as being in good health accompanied by good quality of life and strong relationships. Infected individuals with aggressive status of the COVID-19 virus have shown severe symptoms in addition to the ones noticed in mild cases. The World Health Organization has recognized that shortness of breath, anxiety, and dyspnea are associated with severe COVID-19. Note that severe COVID-19 conditions can lead to death. As of year 2021, there were 115,000 healthcare worker fatalities globally. Due to their occupational exposure, healthcare workers, particularly medical technologists, are among those with significant risk of acquiring COVID-19.
Moving on, the study was done with a qualitative approach through the lens of phenomenology. This research design aimed to delve into the personal accounts of the selection and provide an in-depth understanding of the query at hand, shedding light on their experiences through the course of their infection and reflecting on the realities they faced during the pandemic. Moreover, these narratives cannot be quantified or measured utilizing numbers and equations, as there are no definite or fixed answers to the questions asked. Following that, the selection of 13 registered Filipino medical technologists were gathered through the novel technique wherein they were recruited through referrals while embodying the following qualifications. The data collection and data measures procedures then followed a three-part protocol: the pre-interview preparations, the interview proper, and the post-interview. Delving further, the preparation included the construction of the aide-memoire and the deployment of the following documents. The interview proper is done through a one-on-one semi-structured interview, through a 1 to 2 hours recorded video conferencing meeting. As the interview reached its end, the researcher reiterated the content of the consent form, ensuring the confidentiality and security of any personal data that was collected. Furthermore, the 7-step method of analysis by Colizzi was employed in the study. The first step included the repeated reading of the selection's verbalizations for familiarization. The second step was the identification of the significant statements that were of direct relevance to the phenomenon explored. The next step was formulation, understanding the relevant meaning and grasping the essence of each verbalization to its finest. Thematization is the fourth step, wherein the significant statements were categorized according to the reflected characteristic that best fits into a specific cluster of themes. Following that is the development of an exhaustive description, writing a full and inclusive description of the phenomenon by incorporating the generated themes. The sixth step is condensing the exhaustive descriptions into core concepts that capture the key points deemed to be influential to the phenomenon. Lastly, verification from the selection to guarantee that the researchers were able to capture the fundamentals that resonated from their lived experiences. As for the ethical considerations, the approval of the Ethics Review Committee is essential to continue with the research study, and shown on the screen is the group's certificate of approval from REC. Continuing on, the consent form was written to inform the selection of the relevant information regarding their participation and that they understood their involvement in the research process. It highlighted their right to withdraw at any moment without consequence, and they had the right to limit access to the information they supplied and its interpretation. Personal information about the selection was not disclosed, considered as anonymous and referred to only as R1, R2, and so on. Moreover, the study acknowledged that psychological and emotional triggers may arise during the interview upon the discourse regarding previous experiences and delineated traumas. Hence, a licensed psychology professional was invited to monitor the session to assist when needed. To assure the quality of the data obtained and to safeguard the identity of the selection, all data were saved in a restricted online cloud file utilized in the researchers' Drive accounts, restricted only to researchers and their advisors. Lastly, the researchers ensured that any raw data obtained would be terminated after the study was defended. All required procedures to safeguard individuals' welfare, promote moral and social values, and ensure the integrity of the study was performed, thus contributing to the overall success of the study.
To capture the essence of the 11th wealth of the Filipino registered medical technologists to survive COVID-19, this study was able to generate a compelling alchemy of COVID-19 survival. Based on Gilbert and Malkoff 2021, alchemy is depicted as an inexplicable force that can transform something ordinary into extraordinary. Thus, it partially models the study's prime aspect, COVID-19 survival, through the bounded themes of self-preservation, family and social interactions, management of thoughts and emotion, and spiritual interventions. For visualization purposes, the modified alchemy is on the left and the colored alchemy is showcased on the right side.
Archer 2005 defined that the greater circle signifies the circle of life, denoting the respondents' lived experiences. The smaller circles encompasses the runes it cites to manifest, resonating the four aforementioned themes respectively. Meanwhile, Sarika's 2019 and Nachel 2020 explained that the triangles evoke the four environmental elements: earth, water, fire, and air. Tethering the triangles into a hexagram, it delineates balance and the interplay of the themes with one another. Overall, this alchemy extended the Filipino registered medical technologist's reflection from subjective to the most intersubjective universal outcome, their so-called survival of a lifetime against COVID-19.
The first theme that transpired is survival through self-preservation. As the study defined, it is an act of survival that promotes one's healing through actions that benefit the overall well-being. Consequent to this, the Filipino registered medical technologists urgently isolated themselves to survive and protect other people, as showcased in R1's statement. In essence, WHO 2021 explained that centralized isolation has been found to be a feasible method of slowing down and halting the COVID-19 spread. Simultaneously, the selection adapted changes in lifestyle and hobbies in hopes of adhering to the new normal setup. As articulated by R1, having enough and proper rest helped them in their recovery. With this, Partinen et al. 2021 elucidated the stressful personal consequences caused by the pandemic could also lead to sleep schedule impairment. Thus, sleep is essential for recovering well with mental and physical health. On the other hand, R4 considered eating healthily and observing proper hydration to combat health risks. Naja and Hamade 2020 supplements that nutritional deficiencies are associated with immune function decline and increased infection susceptibility. Consequently, R11 relied on alternative physical activities to strengthen themselves. Essentially, I et al. 2021 stressed the importance of physical activity in providing an opportunity to have a break from stressors while improving self-efficacy. In addition, the participants independently observed precautionary measures to limit transmission within and beyond their four walls. As featured, R10 used air purifiers, wore masks, and avoided proximity with their children. In line with this, CDC 2021 described that the viral spread through palmites may significantly be reduced by wearing masks appropriately even indoors. Also, Dirk of 2020 explained that purifiers could assist in minimizing the density of undesired impurities in the air. As each respondent experienced varied severity in their infection, they sought different medical interventions to treat themselves. As particularized, R3 took over-the-counter drugs like paracetamol, which Sharma 2021 specified to be an efficient fever reliever and painkiller. R1, on the other hand, relied on vitamins. Pursuant to Udin et al. 2021, vitamin C is a powerful antioxidant that reinforces the immune system by promoting signaling activation and neutrophil opsonization and phagocytosis. R9, who had a much more severe case, required oxygen support to manage their breathing. In principle, WHO 2020 recommended the use of therapeutic oxygen for those who are experiencing COVID-19-induced hypoxia and pneumonia. Other medications undertaken by the respondents include gargling and intaking prescribed antiviral drugs, Chinese pneumonia drugs, and herbal medicine.
Likewise, the second theme that emerged from the study is family and social interactions. It is defined in the study as the act of surviving through the love and support of one's family, friends, and other social relations. Subsequent to this theme, the respondents have utilized this as a means of expressing their sentiments by maintaining regular contact with the family to relieve the burden of being isolated due to COVID-19, which was verbalized by R3 and R6. As expressed by Veterans Affairs 2020, apart but connected is a phrase that describes relationships with people. This simple ABC message conveys that families can remain connected even if they are physically separated. Alongside their families, the small acts of love from the friends of the respondents, such as reaching out through chat or video calls, enabled them to cope with the stress and loneliness brought about by isolation and quarantine, as articulated by R11. Based on the study of Juvenen et al. 2021, contentment with digital communication with friends was associated with lower levels of loneliness, anxiety, and depression during stay-at-home and physical distancing mandates. Furthermore, the food and grocery supplies which provided sustenance to the respondents were obtained through their family members and other social connections, as seen in the verbalization of R2 and R3. Essentially, according to Aman and Masood 2020, an individual's nutritional status has been used as a resilience factor against instability during the COVID-19 pandemic. Consequently, the government and other sponsors provided assistance to respondents during their quarantine in the form of financial aid and relief goods, as R6 has verbalized. In relation to this, Reyes et al. 2021 revealed that the Philippine government compensated the healthcare personnel for their services during the COVID-19 pandemic by providing them with the COVID-19 specialist allowance, which they used to purchase necessities during their quarantine. Evidently, medical support from the healthcare professionals through the form of online consultations assisted the Filipino registered medical technologists in triaging their case and avoiding unnecessary hospital visits, as revealed by R10 and R12. D'Agostino 2020 emphasizes that online consultations is an efficient method of assessing suspected cases and guiding the patient's diagnosis and treatment while reducing the risk of COVID-19 disease transmission. Aside from family, friends, and colleagues, the Filipino RMTs also drew motivation from COVID-19 infected patients or survivors to uplift themselves during their isolation. As seen in the verbalization of R6, the support and motivation gave them the needed strength and courage to overcome the realities of quarantine. Von Lunch and Columbus 2021 affirmed this by stating that social interactions have positive health outcomes and promote the improvement of overall well-being.
Moving on, the third theme that emerged is survival through management of thoughts and emotions. As the research elucidated, it is an act of survival by being in control of our own thoughts and emotions when facing an impending dilemma. Consonant to this, the Filipino RMTs move forward with acceptance and self-confidence to conquer the psychological toll of having COVID-19. R5 explained that, as someone who is invariably exposed to the virus, they open-mindedly affirm their sickness as they have long anticipated having the disease. Conforming to Sampogna et al. 2021, acceptance and confidence are positive coping mechanisms related to low levels of distress and improved psychological well-being. Also, Filipino registered medical technologists employed positive self-talk discussions as an affirmative approach to surpassing their COVID-19 journey. As articulated by R7, this enabled them to cope with their suffering in a supportive and balanced way. Hofmeyer et al. 2020 explained that positive self-talk is crucial as it helps lessen a person's vulnerability, improve one's well-being, and fosters resilience. Furthermore, in understanding one's COVID-19 journey, the participant turns to journal writing to reflect, express gratitude, and set forth their next steps as epitomized by R1. Rokak and Bolzarch 2020 stated that journaling is an effective medium to care for one's mental health as it is a conscious and self-initiated effort. On the flip side, concealment of thoughts and emotions was adopted by some respondents as a negative approach to dealing with COVID-19. The statement of R5 expressed that they have decided to conceal their COVID-19 struggles from their families and focus instead on constant check-ins with loved ones as a means of coping up. Moreover, R9 opted to not address their condition or to become disengaged from their situation by doing other activities. In supplementation, Saxon et al. 2016 noted that concealing thoughts and emotions might ease discomfort and make coping easier, but may worsen the issue by impeding the resolution process, making it more challenging to manage mental and emotional trauma. Nevertheless, selected Filipino RMTs divert to find the most of their meddling stressors. As exemplified, R5 chose to work productively during his desolation instead of burdening over his sickness and external stressors. Inherently, Niven et al. 2021 disclosed that working during quarantine stimulates organization, consciousness, and maintenance of functional relationship.
The final theme that resonated from this venture is survival through spiritual interventions. This element principally abides on survival through strong faith and devotions to a higher being. For respondents such as R6, prayer became an outlet for them to express their anxieties and bolster their spirit towards transcendental healing. Ergo, Corpus 2021 established that faith traditions and structured rituals through prayers amplify the sacredness in an individual's everyday life. Alongside the previous category, religion and spirituality provided a unique source of strength for the respondents in times of difficulty and other external forces cannot. R13 expressed that during quarantine, they have turned to religion for comfort and explanation by doing devotional activities. As stated by Sen et al. 2022, religion and spirituality provided a solid foundation that allowed people to see the bright side of a negative situation. It promoted a positive attitude by highlighting the importance of believing that everything happens for a reason. And for the last category of the last team, the respondents were able to maintain their spiritual health thanks to their strong faith in God, as verbalized by R10 and R11. Moreover, having the will to survive helped them improve and maintain a positive outlook in life. The study of Walsh 2020 highlighted the concept of resilience, which is the capacity to overcome adversity at these trying times and the power of belief systems. All in all, the study generated the following themes: mainly survival through self-preservation, family and social interactions, management of thoughts and emotions, and spiritual interventions. Filipino registered medical technologists during this pandemic indeed experienced greater levels of stress and psychological distress. The study recognizes the need for future researches to delve deeper into the long-term effects brought about by COVID-19. In addition, the insights gained from the study had implications to other healthcare practitioners to relate and analyze their lived experiences as they are exposed to and are at risk of acquiring the said disease. So what else can this paper promise? In theory, the study will provide generalized insights from their accounts to enhance existing health management programs. In addition, this paper promises to present new literature regarding the lived experiences of Filipino registered medical technologists to provide resolution to the lack of focused accounts. Lastly, this paper confers to contribute to the formulation and the improvement of programs that will look into the welfare of medical technologists throughout their COVID-19 survival. For the recommendations, the researchers aim to inspire future researches in exploring the lived experiences of other health professionals who have suffered and recovered from COVID 19. Moreover, the researchers primarily encourage authorities and institutions to create programs that will benefit medical technologists. And that concludes the end of our presentation entitled Survival of a Lifetime, Phenomenologizing the Lived Experiences of Filipino Registered Medical Technologists who Survived COVID-19.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is qualitative research in all of its grandeur in the field of medical technology. First of all, I would like to thank the advisor and of this young and talented researchers, and at the same time, the first speaker for this morning session in the person of Professor Maria Frida Zihapan, for her rich, very engaging, very moving, and very refreshing discussion. Professor Hapan, rest assured that you painted a beautiful picture of qualitative research in our imaginations. Indeed, kwentong may kwenta at hindi chismis in this time wherein this information is made rampant and normalized by paid trolls in so many social networking sites where the younger generation of our colleagues are exposed to. These are such powerful choice of words. And although there may be a sharp difference between how quantitative and qualitative research today, we get to learn that they actually complement one another. And together, they give us a better perspective of the scientific undertaking that we wish to address. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is your sign to take a step forward in learning something new. And today, that something new, quote unquote, something new, is the qualitative methodology of conducting research. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, Professor Maria Frida Z. Hapan, PhD, a warm virtual round of applause, please. And at the same time, being a proud former instructor in clinical chemistry for these young researchers under the guidance of Professor Hapan. I would like to extend my gratitude to these ladies for presenting their study entitled Survival of a Lifetime, Phenomenologizing the Lived Experiences of Filipino Registered Medical Technologies who Survived COVID-19. What a very interesting topic. That discussion gave us crystal, for in fact, it's not just interesting, it's also very timely. And that discussion gave us a crystal clear image of what a qualitative research is and should be. Indeed, ladies and gentlemen, our stories matter. Once again, the researchers, Ms. Mika K. R. Nakulanga, Ms. Adjacent Claire De Flores, Ms. Chanel Hershey A. Hernandez, Ms. Myla Vanessa D. King, Ms. Daniela Nicole C. Libwit, and Ms. Veronica Joyce T. Rico. A warm virtual round of applause once again for these strong, young, and talented researchers who in the near future will be our colleagues in the profession. What a powerful way to end our discussion about the application of qualitative research in the medical technology and medical laboratory science profession. So, ladies, would you like to say something new? Would you like to acknowledge someone as of the moment?
We are just very honored to present this venture po in front of our medical technology community, and we're just very grateful to the guidance of our professor, Dr. Hapan, for her unending patience and assistance for us to accomplish this endeavor. So thank you very much po.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Nakulanga and the rest of the team. So at this point, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up our the first part of our discussion. So, dear colleagues, if you wish to ask questions, just drop them in the Q&A box at the bottom portion of your screen. Again, if you wish to ask questions, just drop them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Later on, we'll give our speakers the opportunity to address your questions. So, at this moment, I hope you're still with us since we are okay. Sige. Time check. It's exactly 45 minutes past 9. So before we move on to our next speaker, just to give us a little bit of time to process all those new set of information, we're giving everyone a 5-minute bladder break, a 5-minute music break before we proceed to our speaker. And your 5 minutes starts now. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. So at this point, without further ado, hindi na ako magpapatumpik-tumpik pa since we're already equipped with the basic and most fundamental knowledge on the application of qualitative research in the medical technology profession. Perhaps the next big question is, how do we go about with data gathering? So therefore, to address that, allow me to take this moment to welcome our next speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker graduated in both BS Nursing and Medical Technology. Thus, she has rich experience on the ups and downs of applying both qualitative and quantitative methodologies in research. Furthermore, she finished her Master of Education in the De La Salle University and Master of Science in Medical Technology in the University of Santo Tomas. Eventually, she graduated Doctor of Education in the Philippine Women's University back in 2017. She is currently serving as a research associate in the Research Center for Social Sciences and Education. And at the same time, she is an associate member of the National Research Council, a reviewer of the Journal of the American Society for Clinical Laboratory Science, and an associate editor for the Journal of Social Health. Ladies and gentlemen, another strong tigress from the University of Santo Tomas, Professor Florence Navidad Eddie. Hello there, Professor Navidad. Good morning.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for that kind introduction. Alive na alive. Grabe ang effort ni Sir Clive. Ayan po. So good morning, everyone. So I'm glad to be with you today. So I want to acknowledge the presence of our PAMET President, Sir Mel Salceda, our PAMET officers and directors, and of course, our very own Dr. Manawis, our PAMET members, faculty members, students, and guests who are with us in this session. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Philippine Association of Medical Technologies, Inc. for inviting us to this webinar. So, I permission to share my screen.
Sure, Doc Florence. Sir Ollie will assist you in a while. Oh, that's
okay.
There you go.
Thank you. Okay. So, okay, so to continue, I want to briefly narrate my experience of how I started doing qualitative research. Because most of you know me that I am a quantitative person. Yeah, because I am a statistician and have taught biostatistics for almost 2 decades now. So most of my publications were in quantitative methods. So, but being part of the social health group and as a research associate of the Research Center for Social Sciences and Education, and I was exposed and participated trainings to different research methods, including qualitative research. So my skills in qualitative research are enhanced through the guidance of my 2 mentors in the Research Center for Social Sciences and Education. If I may mention them, Professor Clarence Embatan and Professor Maria Carines Alejandria, which is an HTAC member. Okay, was a HTAC member. So as of today, my researchers are on quantitative, qualitative, and mixed method. Okay, so today my task is to present qualitative research method, the data collection. Now, before I start with the presentation, how many of you have experience doing qualitative method in research? Okay, may I know? Kung ilan sa inyo po? Okay. So meron ba, Sir Clive?
It seems there's only 1 point. The person of do we have 2? In the person of
great.
Miss Anita Vistal, Miss Maria Cinco, and there's yes. So it's very rare.
So, yeah, thank you. So that's great because I will be using their expertise throughout this presentation. Okay. So Medyo naghang. Okay. Ayan. The learning outcomes for today's discussions are to explain the main characteristics of qualitative data collection technique, discuss how to employ those collection techniques based on different qualitative research designs, explain how to improve the trustworthiness of the research doing data collection process, conduct individual interviews and focus group discussions, and collect related documents for document analysis. Okay, so a while ago, Dr. Prof. Hapan discussed qualitative approaches such as the narrative, especially the phenomenology, ethnography, case study, and grounded theory. So these strategies are popular across the social and health sciences today. So qualitative research methods allow us to understand the experience of patients and cares better. So they will enable us to explore how decisions are made and provide us with detailed insights into how interventions may alter care. So to develop such insights, qualitative research requires holistic, rich, and nuanced data, allowing themes and findings to emerge through careful analysis. So having explored the nature and purpose of qualitative research in the previous discussion, now we will explore the methods of data collection used in qualitative research. There are various data collection methods in qualitative research. So as mentioned by Dr. Hapan a while ago, this includes observation, textual or visual analysis, and we have also interviews by means of individual or group interviews. However, the most common method used, particularly in healthcare research, are the interviews and focus groups discussion. So we will explore these two methods in more detail, particularly how they work in practice, the purpose of each when their use is appropriate, and what they can offer for medical research. So what is data collection? From Cambridge Dictionary, data collection is the systematic process by which observations or measurements are gathered in research. That is, each of the research approaches involves using one or more data collection methods. While methods and aims may differ between fields, the overall data collection process remains the same. Therefore, before you begin collecting data, you need to consider the aim of the research, the type of data you will collect, and the methods and procedures you will use to collect, store, and process data. When conducting research, collecting original data has significant advantages. That is, you can tailor data collection to your specific research aims. That means by understanding the needs of your patients or your participants, you can control and standardize the process for high reliability and validity. That means by choosing appropriate measurements and sampling methods. However, there are some drawbacks. Data collection can be time-consuming, labor-intensive, and expensive. In some cases, it's more efficient to use secondary data that has already been collected by someone else, but the data might be less reliable. So to collect high-quality data relevant to your purposes, some key considerations may arise during various steps in the data collection process. So there is the requirement that the different steps to be followed or pursued in order that they are written. Because the first step is to determine your goal. Then next, identify the purposefully selected steps or individual for the proposed study. The next step is indicate the type or types of data to be collected. Then the next step is to plan your data collection procedures. The next step, collect now the data. Then the last step, transcribe and analyze the data. Okay, so we'll go in detail the different steps. So the first step is to determine your goal. So before you start the process of data collection, you need to identify exactly what you want to achieve. Data collected should be rationally connected to the goal set and the overall purpose for collecting the data. So you can start by writing a problem statement. What practical or scientific issue do you want to address, and why does it matter? So if your aim is to test a hypothesis, measure something precisely, or gain large-scale statistical insights, then collect quantitative data. And you collect qualitative data if your aim is to explore ideas, understand experiences, or gain detailed insights into a specific content or context. And if you have several purposes, you can use a mixed method approach that collects both data types, which is the quantitative and the qualitative at the same time. Qualitative research aims, this is the step 2, okay, identify the purposefully selected sites or individuals for the proposed study. So qualitative research aims to purposefully select participants or sites, or the documents or visual material that will best help the researcher understand the problem and the research questions. So selecting information-rich cases for in-depth examination is the logic and power of purposeful sampling. Information-rich cases are those from which a lot can be learned about fundamental issues to the investigation's goal. Therefore, recruit participants who fit the research goal. There are some issues relating to sample definition and recruitment which are widely relevant. So in deciding how many participants to recruit, the time and resources available are critical factors. An untrained qualitative researcher can easily misjudge the time required to conduct a study based on qualitative research interviews. So even a seasoned transcriber is unlikely to be able to transcribe more than 2 one-hour interviews in a single working day. So that means mahirap po mag-transcribe. Because analyzing such a transcript in detail is likely to take at least 2 or 3 full days of work. To these figures must be added the time spent developing the interview guide and recruiting participants, conducting the interviews, traveling to and from them, and reporting findings to participants and or funding agencies. It's either in verbal or written form. Hence, in qualitative research, you will consider the setting, the actors, the events, and the process. The setting where the research will take place, actors who will be observed or interviewed, the events, what the actors will be observed or interviewed doing, process, the evolving nature of events undertaken by the actors within the setting. So how to determine the right interview participants? Consider your goal when looking for people to talk to for a qualitative interview. Like if you want to expand a healthcare clinic, interview existing patients or participants about their needs, If you're researching COVID-19 vaccination for children, or ask parents their perceptions on childhood vaccination, this means that you must interview subjects with the goal of the interview. So when creating high-quality research procedures, establishing inclusion and exclusion criteria for study participants is standard practice. The important aspect of the target population that the investigators will employ to answer research questions are defined as the inclusion criteria. The demographic, clinical, and regional factors are common inclusion criteria. On the other hand, exclusion criteria are characteristics of potential study participants who meet the inclusion criteria but have different traits that could jeopardize the study's effectiveness or enhance their likelihood of a negative outcome. So, common exclusion criteria are characteristics of eligible participants that make them more likely to be lost to follow-up. Misscheduled data collection appointments, present erroneous data, have comorbidities that could bias the study's results or increase the risk of adverse events. So now the question is, how many interviews are enough? Okay, so this is the most interesting point in qualitative research. So how many interviews are enough? The universal, certain, and confident reply to this question is, it depends. Yeah, it depends. The number of people you need depends on the richness of data you have from other sources, your budget, your timetable, and your access to tools or research assistance for transcription and analysis. Interviewing is a difficult task. When you factor in the time spent preparing, arranging, conducting, organizing, transcribing, and evaluating, each 1-hour interview corresponds to 15 total research hours. That is, according to one author and based on my own experience. So because an interview will last about 30, 90 minutes, 2 hours, that means 120 minutes. Yeah, ganun po kahaba ang interview. Okay. So, ganun din kahaba kung paano mo siya transcribe. Kailangan verbatim po kasi siya transcribe. So, for research who need a statistical power to generalize, the sample size is vital, but quality usually takes precedence over quantity for qualitative research. So, according to one author, 5 to 8 are pedagogically helpful. However, this depends on the course unique aims and time limits. In qualitative research, there are no rules for sample size. In-depth knowledge from a small group of people can be quite useful, especially in the circumstances with a lot of data. What you want to know, the objective of the investigation, what's at stake, what will be beneficial, what have credibility, and what can be done with the time and resources available are all factors that influence sample size. However, you might wonder if the data has significantly contributed to the research goal. Then if not, more interviews are necessary. So, are you able to foresee what your interviews will say? Some speculate that this might happen after only 12 interviews. If that's the case, you probably achieve data saturation, and more interviews will yield fewer and fewer insights. Data saturation means that no new information is discovered through data analysis. And it alerts researchers that data collecting may end at that point in the study process. In addition, the information richness of the examples chosen and the researcher's observation or the analytical ability have more to do with the validity, meaning, and insights obtained by qualitative inquiry than the sample size. The size of a sample can be adjusted as needed. Desirable or targeted sample size may be specified when the basic design is created. Okay. And if necessary, authorized by others such as the ethics board. So, kasi pag sa ethics board, minsan, hinahanap nila, ilan yung sample size nila. Okay. That sample size can be a starting point or a minimum. But that isn't always the case. So, madalas sa aking advice, especially pag mixed method or purely qualitative, the minimum na nilalagay namin na sample size is 12. Okay. But as mentioned nga kanina, it could be adjusted as the need arise. Because as field work is completed and the investigation progresses, the sample size and composition might be modified based on what is learned. The emergent character of qualitative research has a powerful impact on the sample size. The sample size, as mentioned a while ago, can be increased or lowered if saturation occurs sooner than predicted. So there are different sampling methods. A sampling strategy is a blueprint for how you will select sources for your data. Sampling may also refer to selecting certain places, times of day, events, and activities to observe in field work. At the very least, good qualitative researchers use purposeful sampling to select data that fits the parameters of the project's research questions, aim, and purposes. So there are two types of sampling methods. Again, this is just simply a review. Okay. So first is the probability sampling methods. In probability sampling, every member of the population has a chance of being chosen. It's primarily employed in quantitative studies. Probability sampling techniques are the best option for producing findings representative of the entire population. So I just want, again, to give you an overview of the different probability sampling techniques. There are four main types of probability sample. We have the simple random sampling, the systematic sampling, stratified sampling, the cluster sampling. So in simple random sampling, every member of the population has an equal probability of getting chosen in a basic random sampling. The entire population should be included in your sample frame. You can use random number generators or other approaches that rely on the chance to accomplish this sort of sampling. So kadalasan draw lots ang ginagamit po natin or the lottery type. Okay, ginagamit natin. Then next we have the systematic sampling. Simple random sampling is comparable to systematic sampling. However, systematic sampling is typically easier to carry out. That means every person in the population is assigned a number. But rather than assigning numbers at random, and individuals are picked at regular intervals. So for example, every fifth member of the class, every fifth member of the neighbors, every fifth member of the community. in the stratified sampling. This sampling approach divides the population into subgroups called the strata. That is based on the relevant feature. It helps you make more precise findings by ensuring that every subset is correctly represented in the sample. And for the cluster sampling, the cluster sampling divides the population into subgroups, but each segment should have similar characteristics to the entire sample. So rather than picking from each subgroup, you choose whole groupings randomly. So if feasible, you may add every person from each sampled cluster. So if the clusters are big, one of the following strategies can be used to sample individuals from inside each cluster. And this is now called the multi-stage sampling technique. Yeah, you may use this combination of the different types of sampling technique. You could also combine probability sampling methods and non-probability sampling methods in your research design. So for the non-probability sampling, individuals are chosen based on non-random criteria, and not every individual has a chance of being included. This sample is quicker to get and less expensive, but it has a larger risk of sampling bias. So as a result, the population inferences you may draw are weaker than with probability samples. And your conclusions may be more constrained. So even if you're working with a non-probability sample, you should try to make it as representative of the population as feasible. Because in exploratory and qualitative research, non-probability sampling approaches are frequently utilized. This study aims to gain early knowledge of a tiny or under-researched community rather than to test a hypothesis about a large population. So qualitative research typically relies on purposeful sampling. It is founded on finding the best cases for the study and gives the best data. Therefore, it is important to be strategic when sampling to find information-rich cases that best meet the study objectives and questions. So these are the different types of non-probability sampling technique. So we have the convenience sampling, the purposive sampling, the snowball sampling, the quota sampling, and the networking sampling. So for the convenience sampling, a convenience sample comprises people who are most easily accessible to the researcher. This is quick and low-cost technique to collect preliminary data. But there's no way to know if the sample is representative of the population. Thus, the results aren't generalizable. That means kadalasan ito yung ginagamit po sa mga groceries. Natanong, ano yung pinaka-favorite na shampoo nyo? Ano pinaka-favorite na toothpaste nyo? So, ganun po siya. In the purposive sampling, this sort of sampling, also known as the judgment sampling, entails the researcher utilizing their knowledge to choose the most relevant sample to the research goals. It's frequently employed in qualitative research, especially when the researcher wishes to learn more about a certain phenomena or phenomenon rather than making statistical inferences, or when the population is small and specific. A purposive sample must have explicit inclusion criteria and justification for being effective. Ito po yung madalas namin ginagamit po, especially pag mixed method po, the quantitative, qualitative, or in the qualitative. So ito po yung madalas na ginagamit, the purposive sampling technique. In the snowball sampling, the term snowball sampling refers to a method in which each participant leads to selecting another. That means this is the referral sampling technique. So for example, you may ask a participant to suggest more participants if he or she is an excellent source of information and or appears to be well connected with members of the wider group in whom you are interested in. So sa snowball sampling kasi, ito yung individual referral. In the group referral, this is called the networking sampling. Okay, so instead of individual na ituturo nila o i-refer po nila, ay pwede pong by group. For example, yung diabetes group. Saan po dito makahanap ng organizations, ibang organizations ng diabetes? So by group po, so pwede po siya. Then next, we have the quota sampling. Quota sampling is an approach for identifying the important features of the population you're interested in and their total prevalence. Then you choose example participants that reflect each of the important qualities in the population in the same proportion. So for example, kailangan nyo ng 100 na respondents, participants. So, and you want their gender, ang distribution natin is yung gender or the sex, the sex. So you will distribute 50 for females and 50 for males. So pag nakuha nyo na po yun, 50 respondents na female, 50 respondents na male, then bonggat, tapos yun yung quota sampling nyo. So if you are looking for a single case in certain projects, that means in the case of oral history or life history interviews, in the case study research and autography, for example, may require the selection of a single strong and robust case. So there are several methods for choosing a single participant, two of which are well known. So we have the first is a single notable situation that serves as participant. So in other words, you find a strong robust case that promises to give a lot of information. And the second method is in autoethnography. You can look for a single notable participant based on self-reflection. This implies that you can make yourself the subject of an investigation. Okay, so going on, so we have now the step 3. Okay, so the step 3 is indicate the type of or types of data to be collected. Okay, so first, choose your data collection method. Based on the data you want to collect, decide which method best suits your research. So we have the experimental, interview, ethnography, and others. So in experimental research, primarily a quantitative. So we have intensive focus groups and ethnographies. These are the qualitative methods. Then surveys, observations, archival research, and secondary data collection can be quantitative or qualitative. So carefully consider what method you will use to gather data that helps you directly answer your research questions. So data collection comes from the following. So as mentioned a while ago by Dr. Hapan, we have the observations, the interviews, documents, and audio-visual materials. First is the qualitative observations. The observations occur when a researcher records field notes on the behavior and activities of people at the study location. This field records activities at the research site in an unstructured or semi-structured way using some preliminary questions that the inquirer wants to know. Qualitative observers can take on various roles from non-participation to full participation. So you can be a complete participant, observer as participant, participant as observer, and complete observer. Interviews. The researcher performs face-to-face interviews with participants, that is through virtual or the face-to-face in person, conducts telephone interviews with participants, or conducts focus group interviews with 6 to 8 interviews or 6 to 10 interviewees in each group. These interviews consist of unstructured, open-ended questions designed to elicit the participants' thoughts and ideas. The qualitative research interview aims to describe and interpret important themes in the interviewees' lives. So the primary goal of interviewing is to comprehend what the interviewees are saying. Then during the process of research, the investigator may collect qualitative documents. Ito po yung madalas namin ginagawa kasi madalas po kami nasa field. Okay, so as a researcher po, a faculty researcher. So madalas po ako nasa field. So habang nag-i-interview din po kami, so nagtatanong na rin po kami ng mga documents na ginagamit po nila. So pinipicturean po namin yon. Photo documentation po kami. Yan, or video documentation. Yun po ang ginagawa namin to gather those documents. Or if may extra copy po sila, humihingi po talaga kami ng mga extra copies. So because this may be public documents, newspapers, pwede po, minutes of the meetings, official reports, or the private documents, personal journals, diaries, letters, emails, pwede pong mga source ng documents po yun. Okay. Qualitative audio and visual materials are the last types of qualitative data. Okay. This data may take the form of photographs, as mentioned a while ago, art items, videotapes, and any other kind of sounds. Yes po, sounds kasama po. Photographs and pictures from advertising are frequently used in studies. Audio data, such as music, may be included with text, because audio-visual data has visual and audio-textual components. It is classified as multiple fields. Movies, television, videos, and web series are all examples of audio-visual data. These unusual forms create reader interest in a proposal and capture helpful information that observations and interviews may miss. So yung isa pong output po namin doon sa isang study po namin, the national study po, ng National Catechetical Study, okay? Ginamit po namin ay yung photo, mga pictures po ng mga different simbahan, mga churches po. Yes po. So present namin sila, diniscuss namin, so ano yung pagkakaiba ng structures nila. Ganun po siya. So that means pwede pong gamitin po yung mga photo. Then, next, we have now step 4. The step 4 is to plan now your data collection procedures. Okay? So, you must plan how to implement the methods. So, once you have determined the method or methods you will use. So, what steps will you take to ensure that you get reliable observations or measurements of the variables you're interested in? So if you're doing surveys or interviews, for example, decide on the format of the questions. The study questions identify the communities and individuals most suited to offer data on the phenomena of interest. So there are different steps in planning your data collection procedures. First, you could design interview questions. Determine the types of interview. Create a data management plan. And of course, don't forget the ethical considerations or ethical principles in data collection procedures. So as mentioned earlier, the two widely used qualitative data collect methods are interviews and focus group discussion. Thus, we'll focus more on this discussion. So we have the interviews. A qualitative interview is a more personal form of research compared to questionnaires. That is, according to Briggs, an author, interviews are used in nearly 90% of all social science research. Respondents can share their thoughts, motivations, and experiences through interviews. They can narrate narratives with dramatic storylines, heroes, and antagonists. Such narratives shape how people perceive the world, defining opportunities and restrictions for action. So interviews, participants can offer accounts. Sorry. Bumalik ako. Ayan. So respondents. Okay. So such narratives shape how people perceive the world, defining opportunities and restrictions for action. So through interviews, participants can offer accounts or rationales, explanations, and justifications for their behavior and viewpoints. So interviews or interviewees might expose their unique vocabulary and language and explain why they use clicks, jargons, or slang. Interviews are beneficial for giving information and context on difficult situations to see or access efficiently. Interviews may also provide access to knowledge about historical events, uncommon occurrence, heinous acts, secret affairs, tragedies, celebrations, or buried treasure. The interviewer can probe. By meaning of probe, you can ask or follow up research questions to the interview participant. So you may now design the interview questions. First step in planning is to design the interview questions, formulate one or more research questions that precisely define what you want to find out. So some general tips can help ensure good data. Generally speaking, good interview questions have the following characteristics. So design questions that align with data collection and data analysis goals. Then you plan structured interviews with open-ended questions. In most cases, yes/no questions should be followed by why or in what ways, or better yet, they should be rewarded to encourage a more fine-grained answer. That means to what extent is, okay. So for example, you can use how instead of do you like your roommate, you may use the open-ended question. How do you feel about your roommate? Okay. Then avoid leading questions. For example, rather than asking, don't you appreciate the way your spouse looks out for you? It is better to ask, in what ways do you feel your spouse looks out for you? Then create interview questions that are clear and easy to understand. It must be simple, jargon-free, and attend directly to the interest and knowledge of interviewees. It should avoid acronym, abbreviations, jargon, and scholarly talk. Make research questions focused but flexible. They are not double-barreled, but rather inquire about one thing at a time. Then uphold rather threaten the interviewee's preferred identity. For instance, if the research participant views herself as a social justice activist, it is better to ask, how do you think your volunteer efforts affect the local voting turnout? then do you think that simply volunteering impacts your voting turnout? Okay, so ayusin lang, reward lang siya. Then encourage storytelling. Are accompanied appropriate follow-ups and probes. Okay, you may ask, can you give an example? Ito yung mga probe questions. Tell my story about that. How might you go about doing this? Okay, so as you move into interview design, it is important to remember that interview questions cannot be asked the same way as research questions. So qualitative research questions are inductive. That means open-ended and often begin with the words what or how. These questions may employ non-directional language, including words and phrases such as you explore, describe, illuminate, unpack, generate, build meaning, and seek to understand. Now, you may now format your questions. So there are three basic approaches for gathering qualitative data via open-ended interviews. So they entail various levels of planning, conception, and instrumentation. Each strategy has its own set of advantages and disadvantages and a distinct goal. Some interviews are well-structured, organized, and planned, while others are free-flowing, spontaneous, and wandering. So the first structure of interview is the structured interviews, also known as standardized open-ended interviews. They are made up of a series of carefully phrased and organized questions to put each respondent through the same sequence and ask them the same questions with practically the same wording. So when comparing and contrasting data from a large sample, structured interviews are recommended. Structured interviews are also common when using research assistants because the interview schedule acts as the major research instruments. So for example, in large-scale telephone interviews, using a stimulus response framework, or the research assistant or research company professionals can be taught to ask questions consistently. The lack of flexibility and depth in highly planned interviews are the drawbacks, because interview schedules encourage the researcher to stick to the script. They also prevent the interviewer from investigating or picking up on emotional signs like hesitations, vocal tone changes, or other nonverbal reactions. This method implies that respondents will respond honestly and uniquely each time a question is posed. Another structure is the unstructured interviews, and often known as conversational interviews. This is more fluid and adaptable. The interviewer begins by asking open-ended questions and probing inquiries, or even just a list of bullet points. The majority of the inquiries will arise from the present situation. Often, the interview process is how researchers discover what facts are most fascinating and relevant, and flexible interview guidelines enable researchers to focus on the themes that emerge as the most fruitful and significant. Unstructured interviews might happen at any moment during the fieldwork, over a meal or drink, or they can be scheduled in advance. Nagawa na rin po kasi namin to. Okay, so interview kami sa loob ng van. Okay. So, may mga bullet points lang kami, no? Kung ano yung mga points na dapat i-interview namin on the way. So, going from one town to the other town. Okay, so nasa loob po kami ng van, ini-interview po namin yung aming mga respondents po, aming mga participants. Yan po. So overflowing lang yun. So doon namin nakikita yung mga reactions nila. So of course, the emotions. So from their emotions, magre-react kami, magpo-probe kami. So yun, continuous lang po yun. So yung 1 hour, 2 hours na biyahe po namin, marami na po kami nag-gather doon ng mga data. Because unstructured interviews utilize organic questions, the resultant data is more wandering and complicated. It might be challenging to compile and interpret data gathered through casual conversational interviews. Yes po. Kaya medyo nahirapan din yung aming transcriber. Because different questions elicit varied replies. The researcher must spend a significant amount of time sorting through responses to identify patterns that have arisen at various stages throughout several interviews with various persons. The more spontaneous the interview technique, the more likely the respondents will respond with spontaneous, vibrant, and surprising replies. In the same way, the more organized the interview setting is, the simpler it will be structured later, the interview using analysis. Okay, the next one, the last structure is the semi-structured interviews. This is the most one. The semi-structured or general interview guide approach is designed to ensure that each interviewee is asked the same general questions, but this provides more focus than the conversational or unstructured approach, but still allows for some flexibility and adaptability in gathering information from the interviewee. So especially po kasi pag yung sa mga advices, mga students po, okay, so ito po lagi ang gawa ko po sa kanila, the semi-structured po. At may guide questions, then may follow-up questions they can probe para maging flexible and adaptable in gathering the information. Interview guides can be developed in more or less detail. An interview guide is created to guarantee that each individual has the same fundamental lines of inquiry. The interviewer is free to develop a conversation around a certain topic naturally, ask questions, and establish a conversational style, but only with a preset focus on a specific issue. The guide helps as a checklist during the interview to ensure that everything is in order. Okay, so we have now the interview types. So okay pa po kayo? Okay. So varied inquiry traditions place a different emphasis on certain issues and fieldwork techniques. The way people are interviewed varies significantly among cultures and inquiry methods. So first, we have the ethnographic interviews. These are formal, unscripted conversations. They frequently happen in the field and sound like a casual exchange of remarks. Unlike other fieldwork, however, the ethnographic interview is a dialogue that the researcher initiates that may not have happened otherwise. It's a naturalistic interview conducted informally and is frequently the outcome of participant observation. You may, for example, interview during house party breaks, speak with nurses during graveyard hours when they are agitated, communicate with participants as they set up their beauty, jewelry, or cooking supplies, or interview tourists while they wait in the airport. So nagawa na rin po namin to habang kumakain po kami. Okay, so nag-interview po kami. Okay, so the usual ko anong ginagawa. Okay, then next type of the interview types is informant. Another popular interview format is informant interviews. The term informant refers to knowledgeable and experienced persons in the scene who can express tales and explanations that others will not who are exceptionally pleasant and willing to share information. Finding reliable sources frequently necessitates a long-term connection. So for example, ito po yung mga supervisors nila or yung mga heads, mga department heads po, are representative po ng community. So they are the informants. So another example, a personal nurse caring for a cancer patient found that the conversations that emerged with this informant provide invaluable data about the patient's perspectives on life. So this is called or they are called the informant. Another interview types is the phenomenological interview. This writes a first-hand account of a lived experience to explain a phenomenon as concretely as feasible. So as mentioned a while ago by Dr. Hapan, in phenomenological research, multiple focus interviews rely on the participants' recollections and thoughts to revisit events. The phenomenological study tries to explain a phenomena as it manifests itself in the participants' consciousness and returns to the things themselves as they were presented at the outset. Another type of interview is the narrative interview. The narrative interviews are unstructured, open-ended interviews in which the participant is encouraged to narrate stories rather than merely answer questions. The participants' stories may be about them, their experiences, or their observed events. Another, similar to the narrative, is the oral history. So it is a sort of narrative interview that asks people who observe historical events with the goal of reconstructing history. Oral histories frequently focus on the experiences and viewpoints of members of oppressed groups whose voice silence omitted from the formal accounts. So example po ngayon ay yung Katips na movie. Ayan po. So for example, suppose you interview an elderly citizen who lived and survived under the martial law era. In this case, yung mga experience po sa Katips, di po ba? During the martial law. Okay. Interviews with life stories or biographic content or biographic interviews can also generate stories. In oral histories, life history techniques focus on a specific event. As interviewees to talk about their whole lives, their recollections, and what they want people to know. Conducting life story interviews with members of your own family or renowned people who have captured the public imagination may be very engaging. So ito rin po yung ginamit din po sa Katips. They can also bring empathy and understanding to persons otherwise seen as socially abnormal or undesirable. Then next is creating a data management plan. So before you start collecting data, you need to decide how to organize and store it. Researchers record information from interviews by making handwritten notes, audio taping, or videotaping. So that means ano yung dala-dala mo pag nag-i-interview ka. So as you collect data, keep track of anything significant. Okay. So first is the field notes. Field notes are the data. They are the written or recorded notes of your observation in the field. So ito yung madalas na bit-bit po namin. Okay, lalo na sa field nga po ako lagi. So meron po kami field notes. So lahat ng sagot po, nakasulat po lahat yun. Ano yung sequence, ano yung events, ano yung place, yung areas mo. Sinusulat po namin lahat. So to keep a chronological order, it's important to record the date and time of your field notes. So nakasulat doon anong oras, anong day, anong oras. Yan po. It's also a good idea to write down the location. So kung saan kami nakaupo, ayan. Nakasulat po lahat yun. And if the field note refers to an encounter with a specific participant or group of participants, write down that information. So field notes should be organized systematically. So more researchers are audibly recording the raw field data with consent, of course. Okay, so tatanungin nyo, okay lang po ba i-record po natin yung interview namin sa inyo? So rather than writing them down. So yung iba kasi ay nahihirapan magsulat. Although ang ginagawa po namin sabay. So we have the field notes, then i-record din namin. So dun sa field notes po namin, sinusulat lang po namin yung pinaka-highlight ng mga sagot po nila. Nakasulat po yon. Okay. So identified agad. So nakikita mo kasi yung na-form na team. Okay. So during the interview. So then, at the same time, nire-record namin dahil kailangan namin ng verbatim. Okay. Sa pagka-transcribe ng data. We usually use the MaxQDA. This is a software to analyze the data. Okay. So, of course, we thank to the ubiquity of smartphones, digital audio recorders, and voice recognition software. Although yung voice recognition software kasi minsan, di ba, depende kung paano niya naririnig siya. So, especially pag Tagalog na, wala na, nababago. But sometimes yung English din po, naiiba siya. So, making audio recordings may be as simple and inconspicuous as conversing on the phone. However, researchers should take note even if the interview is taped or recorded as a backup if the recording technology malfunctions. Also, researchers must prepare ahead for the transcription of audio tapes if they utilize them. So, pag natapos ang interview, papatranscribe nyo po agad para be sure na hindi siya mawala. Okay. So, while photos and video can give vivid and precise documentation of the specific setup or the attendees in attendance, they come with the drawback of removing anonymity. Indeed, Ethics Board will stipulate that data be kept anonymous and may restrict the use of images or recordings that identify specific individuals or locations. So, kailangan po ipapaalam nyo rin po kasi ito. Pwede po ba namin kipicturan? Pwede po ba namin picturan itong place na to? Pwede po namin kuhanan po yung mga documents nyo. Okay. So, people are becoming more sensitive and worry about digital data collecting due to the advent of quick internet uploads. So, alam naman po natin na. So, the interview protocol guide. So, ano pa yung isang dala-dala natin? So, aside from the field notes, of course, we have the audio tape, we have the interview protocol guide. So, dala-dala po natin to. So, this is another material. The interview protocol is used for asking questions and recording answers during a qualitative interview. This protocol includes the following components. A heading, the date, place, interviewer, sino interviewee. Instructions for the interviewer to follow. So those standard procedures are used from one interview to another. The questions typically an icebreaker question at the beginning. Okay, so syempre sa simula para, 'di ba? At is hindi awkward yung pagtatanong at pag-uusap nyo. Okay. So meron tayong icebreaker question at the beginning, followed by 4 to 5 questions that are often the sub-questions in a qualitative research plan, followed by some concluding statement or a question such as, who should I visit with to learn more about my questions? So probes for 4 to 5 questions. That means you follow up. You may follow up questions and ask individuals to explain their ideas in more detail or to elaborate on what they have said. Then you make a space on that protocol. You make a space between the questions to record responses. So ito yung questions, may blank. Okay, so doon sinusulat. Okay. Minsan yun na rin po ang ginagamit namin as field notes. Okay, yung protocol guide. Then a final thank you statement to acknowledge the time the interviewers spent during the interview. Okay. So wag na wag po kakalimutan yon para makakabalik po tayo sa kanila. Okay. So what about the other materials? Yung documents. The sources of secondary data are the following. So of course, aside from the interviews, the focus group discussion, we have the secondary data. Have a participant keep a journal or diary during the research study. Okay. Collect personal letters from participants, analyze public documents, examine the autographies and biographies, have participants take photographs or videotapes, chart audits, medical records. Okay, those are the sources of secondary data na pwede po natin nagamit. So as mentioned then, yung mga iba kanina. So another is the audiovisual materials. Sources of audiovisual materials for analysis. Examine physical trace evidence. Okay. For example, yung footprints, okay, in the snow, okay, pwedeng mga evidence po yun. Okay, yung mga thumb marks, di ba? Pwedeng evidence po yun. Videotape or film a social situation of an individual or group. Examine photographs or videotapes. Collect sounds, the music sounds, a child's laughter, and pwedeng audiovisual materials mga to. Collect email messages, examine processions or ritual objects, collect sounds, smells, taste, or any stimuli of the senses. Those are the audiovisual materials. Of course, sabi nga natin kanina, hindi natin kakalimutan the ethical principles during the conduct of this study. So it's either quantitative or qualitative research. The qualitative research is a method of exploring and capturing people's subjective experiences, meanings, and voices, but it can pose ethical issues for both the participants and researchers. So research ethics may have to include the safety of human subjects and what constitutes socially responsible and acceptable research. The study protocol should provide enough information to protect human participants. Furthermore, such protocol must include information on how this study will be carried out and information on participant access, informed permission, and data access and storage. The problems of qualitative research can be mitigated by understanding and using well-established ethical concepts such as autonomy, beneficence, and fairness. With autonomy, that means respect for people. The respect for people means acknowledging participants' rights, such as the right to be informed about the study, the right to choose whether or not to join freely, and the ability to withdraw at any time without punishment. And also, you may use the informed consent. The informed consent, which involves striking a suitable balance between over-informing and under-informing. Consent has been referred to as a trust negotiation, and it requires continuous renegotiation. So after the participant has been informed, both verbally and in writing, about the study's purpose and scope, the types of questions that are likely to be asked, the use to which the results will be put, the method of anonymization, and the extent to which participants' utterances will be used in reports, the participants now must give written consent. So pag clear po sa kanila lahat yun. Participants should be given time to contemplate their involvement, and they may ask the researcher questions. The next ethical principle is the beneficence. Beneficence means doing good for others and avoiding harm. That means the benefit must outweigh the risk. This is the ethical concept intimately tied to research. If researchers follow the beneficent principle, they must keep an eye on the possible repercussions of exposing participants' names. It is suggested that pseudonyms be used. or may use code. You'll probably need to anonymize and secure data to avoid leak sensitive information. So you may use number coding. Pwede po yun. So if you're gathering data from people, the confidentiality of participants' identities extend to publications. Participants should be informed about how the findings will be shared. So even if the participants' codes and other data are anonymous, they might reveal their identities. So participants would ideally agree to the use of quotations in publications. So dapat naka-indicate din po kasi yon sa informed consent. Okay, another principle is justice. The justice principle relates to fairness and equal distribution. One of these concepts' most important and distinguishing characteristics is the prohibition of participant exploitation and abuse. So recognizing the participants' vulnerability and their contributions to the study demonstrate the researchers' awareness and implementation of the principle of justice in qualitative research investigations. So next is confidentiality. This means the confidentiality of data. All information obtained from the respondents will be kept confidential and will not be disclosed, divulged, or used, whether directly or indirectly, to any other person or entity throughout the study's duration. Another principle is the non-maleficence. Ensuring the safety and well-being of study participants is an important element of ethical research. While much qualitative research poses only minor risk to participants, it is important not to overlook the risk that can arise, especially in research on topics that are sensitive in some way, because they focus on personal issues, taboo issues, or issues that pose a threat to those participating in it. Risk assessments could also consider the risk to researchers posed by lone working or the nature of the research. So meron po kami tinatawag na table risk. So kung saan mo identify mo kung gaano kataas yung risk, okay, ng mga interviewees. A fundamental ethical requirement of all research is that it is scientifically sound. It should be well planned and executed by researchers with sufficient experience and supervision. It should also be worth doing because the outcomes are likely beneficial. Okay? So, step 5, malapit na po tayo. Ayan, step 5, collect the data. Okay, so you may now collect the data. Qualitative data collection procedures. Okay, so finally, you can implement your chosen methods to measure or observe the variables you are interested in. You may conduct a one-to-one interview, or you may use electronic interviews, or you may use the focus group discussion in collecting the data. So, preparation for the interview. Okay. So, you select a location for the interview where both the interviewer and the subjects can concentrate. So, wag naman yung sobrang ingay. Okay. So, before you meet or the interview starts, prepare them for the importance of the interview. Make the goal of the study clear to interview participants. They should understand the study's context and the significance of the research. Describe how you will put the responses to use. Address terms of confidentiality if necessary. Make sure the interviewer understands the interviewing procedure. Indicate the average duration of the interview. Dapat simula pa nila gaano kahaba. Sabihin niyo kung 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, or 120 minutes. Identify the interviewee's contact information. Okay. So the interviewer's contact information. So dapat sabihin nyo, pag may problema, kukontakin nyo po ako dito. Allow the interviewer to address any questions or concerns you may have regarding the interview. So tanungin nyo sila kung may matanong din sila sa inyo. Prepare a method for recording data. Then, opening the interview. So nakapag-prepare na kayo, opening the interview. The first few minutes of interview should break the ice and set expectations. So researchers can confirm the length of the interview by saying something like this. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me today. I have a schedule for an hour together and so on. So when you start the interview, consider that the ethics board requires typical informed consent for audio recorded interviews, because initial impressions may have a big impact on the rest of the interview. So researchers should practice how they will present informed consent and give the participant time to read it and ask questions. This is also a good time to scribble some field notes about the interview context, the nonverbal communication, the interviewee's appearance, where the interviewee chose to see it, whether the interviewee arrived on time, and any other interesting information that will not be captured in audio recording. So isusulat po lahat yun sa field notes. So the initial questions should build rapport, helping the interviewee feel comfortable, pleasant, and educated once the expectations have been stated. Questions like, when did you describe to become a doctor, or a non-threatening, open-ended, and extremely simply inviting, and they will engage replies right away. So that means begin interviews with get to know you questions to ease the interviewee into the conversations. So there are tips for conducting an interview. Throughout the interview, it is crucial to listen carefully and attempt to nonverbal cues, and the fact that their meaning might vary depending on the context. For instance, a head nod could mean I understand, I agree, I'm ready to proceed, I like this question, or I'm ready to get out of here, and if I nod, maybe we'll be done faster. Yun po. So eye contact and gestures can let participants understand that you are engaged in what they are saying and want them to keep talking. Probes or follow-up questions can also be used to show active listening and collect further information. A probe might be as simple as, can you give me an example of that? Do you have a story about that? Or please tell me more. Additional tips. Add questions. Ask question one at a time, paraphrase answers for recollection, avoid interrupting, avoid interrogation, provide transition between major topics, hindi yung sunod-sunod, attempt to remain as neutral as possible. Be careful about the appearance when note-taking. Occasionally verify the tape recorder if working, okay, or is still working. Don't get distracted by devices. So, dapat yung mga latang cellphones yun, naka-switch off. At before na mag-start kayo, dapat sabihin nyo rin sa mga interviewees nyo na kung po pwedeng i-turn off or silent mode ang kanilang cellphones. Ending interviews as subjects if they have anything to add. Then, of course, thank participants. Let them know what to expect next. So that means a good way to close the interview is by expressing gratitude and reassuring the respondents of confidentiality. This is also the time to let the participants know that their data will be kept safe and confidential. So after the interview, verify if the tape recorder, okay, if used, work throughout the interview. So, i-check nyo po muna bago po kayo umalis. So, make any notes on your written notes. So, lahat ng mga dapat pang isulat nyo na po. Write down any observations made during the interview. Lahat, kung ano na-obserbahan nyo, kung ano nakita nyo, ano napansin nyo, sinusulat po lahat. So I want to show you a few-minute demonstration on conducting a one-to-one interview. This video was uploaded from YouTube. Okay, so i-jump ko naman siya agad.
Emily and Erin, we talked on the phone. Hi, Erin. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. I'm glad you could come meet with me. Thank you. Glad to be here. How are you doing today? Doing well. Doing well. How about you? I'm good. Long day, but you know, feel ya. Gotta make it through. So I'll be interviewing you about your experience with problem-based learning, as it is during your graduate year. I'm looking to understand how this process of learning affected or did not affect your interpersonal skills, and primarily team working. So this is just a preliminary interview. It shouldn't take more than 10 minutes. And I just wanted to let you know there's no right or wrong answers. Take your time with your responses. Just all I really want is your opinions and experiences about problem-based learning. So if you have any questions, I'll sit down at the end. We can go over those. Okay. All right. So this interview will also be audio recorded. Okay. Just so you know. And that would be used to track the information during the study. If you don't mind, I'm going to test the recorder before we begin. Okay. All right. Looking good. Okay. So I also ask that you sign this informed consent. So this is for being audio recorded and for being in this study. Thank you. And just so you know, the information in here is going to be anonymous and confidential. And after the study is completed, it'll be completely destroyed. Okay. Okay. So if you have any, if at any time during the study you no longer wish to be part of it, just let me know and we can stop. All right. Sounds good. All right. Ready to start? Sure. Sounds good. Okay, so describe how problem-based learning is being used in your curriculum.
Okay, so problem-based learning is being used, going to help us underline things. I would say just working in the groups of 4 will really help because in every setting we're going to be working as a team and thinking through problems together and learning from each other, gaining new perspective. So I think the teamwork aspect will really help translate those skills as well.
Well, that's all I have for you.
Okay.
Do you have any questions for me?
No, I don't.
All right. Well, if you ever think of anything, feel free to call me.
Okay.
And I'll be calling you again just to verify everything you said or if I have any additional questions for you.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time, Emily.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so next we have now the electronic interviews, or it is called the mediated interviews. Okay, these are conducted using technology mediums such as phone, computer, or other handheld devices rather than in person. So the face-to-face interviews have the distinct benefit of delivering rich information in nonverbal communications. However, in many cases, whether due to geography, cost, disability, social anxiety, or refusal to meet in person during the pandemic, then mediated interviews or the electronic interviews prove a valuable vehicle for interviewing. So the mediated interviews can be synchronous and asynchronous. All parties meet and converse simultaneously in synchronous techniques as in face-to-face method. Telephone or webcam chats as well as text-based internet chats are examples of synchronous approaches. Then asynchronous techniques allow the 2 sides to speak at separate periods throughout the interview. Emails, internet forums, and bulletin boards, and some networking sites are examples. Finally, certain mediated communication methods can be asynchronous or synchronous, such as the text messaging. The strengths of the mediated interviews or the electronic interviews. So one of the most important advantages of mediated interviews is their capacity to contact participants who are spread out across a large geographic region or otherwise inaccessible. So kahit nasaan siya. Each person can engage in mediated interviews in a venue of his or her choosing. For example, you might conduct synchronous interviews with moms of newborns utilizing internet conferencing software. This method gives comfort and allows researchers to study people that would otherwise be unavailable. So tulad ngayon po, madalas natin ginagamit na Zoom, the Gmeet, and so on. Increased interaction and sharing can also be encouraged through mediated ways. So when the researcher gives materials through email and the respondents have time to thoroughly think about the data before replying, follow-up interviewing that asks participants to reflect on initial interpretations may be more thoughtful. So another advantages of mediated approaches is that they might help balance power imbalances and encourage full and engagement from all participants. Another advantage is the text mediated systems provide data that would otherwise be unavailable in face-to-face interactions. The degree and quality of exhibited grammar and spelling abilities are data in and of themselves. The authors discovered that chatroom interviews are the best way to generate interesting conversations from homosexual males who use the internet to locate sexual partners. Finally, mediated, contrary to popular belief, required the researcher to acquire less equipment than traditional interviews. Of course, mediated techniques necessitate using a computer with an internet connection or a phone. Audio recorders, batteries, and transcribing devices are not required for interview conducted over text, email, or internet platforms such as Skype. Because the textual material is self-transcribing, such interviews save researchers time and money on transcription. So meron kasi mga ibang software na ganun. Pwede agad na meron siyang translation or magta-transcribe siya. But of course, there are several notable disadvantages to mediated interviews. They deliver magic care, embodied on or nonverbal data paired to face-to-face techniques. In mediated procedure, risk indications like facial expressions, physical appearance, tone of voice, odor, laughing, and even the participant's choice of the seat are less visible. The lack of two-way nonverbal communication reduces the co-construction of meaning in the interviews. Second, mediated interviews necessitate the respondents' technical knowledge and access. So, kailangan marunong din sila gumamit. So, participants who claim to be computer aware may have trouble downloading, filling out, saving, turning an emailed interview guide as an attachment. And of course, yung paggamit pa lang minsan ng Zoom, di ba, mga Gmeet. Because younger, better educated, and wealthier persons have more access to technology than older, less educated, or poorer people. Mediated interviews may bias the sample or leave out important information. Another drawback of mediated technique is that they might cause participant distraction. Because no one is watching, respondents may be inclined to multitask, such as driving, housekeeping, eating, or checking email while they are being observed. Madalas naman po nangyayari during the vote. Participant attrition is another issue, particularly for asynchronous techniques. Participants drop out of email or online forum interviews for reasons including inconsistency in computer use, disconnecting from a specific web service, or deleting or losing interviewer communications directed to their junk email boxes. So interviews conducted through computer or text messaging might potentially jeopardize confidentiality. Textual contact is preserved in numerous places, including the researchers and respondents' various computer servers, and various websites or forums. So when data is kept in many locations, it's easier to compromise privacy. Furthermore, participants are more inclined to share their interviews with others if they have a mediated copy. Okay? So another discussion is focus group discussion. Konting slide na lang po ako, konti na lang po. So a focus group is a small group of people interviewed on a specific topic. The interview is usually conducted in group of 6 to 10 or 6 to 8 persons with comparable backgrounds to participate for 1 to 2 hours. A succession of focus groups will be conducted in thorough research to obtain a range of opinions and to improve confidence in whatever patterns emerge. Focus group interviews were created in response to the fact that many consumer decisions are made in a social setting, frequently resulting from conversations with others. So before you invite audience members or ask your first question, lay the foundation for a successful experience. Taking time in planning ensures that you have a clear aim, invite the relevant people, and prepare questions that provide valuable responses. Instead of the term interviewer, this time the word focus group moderator might be used since the term interviewer conveys a more limited idea of a two-way conversation between an interviewer and interviewee. On the other hand, the focus group allows for various interactions between the interviewer and responder and among all group members. Kaya moderator na po kayo, not the interviewer. Focus groups interviews have several advantages for qualitative inquiry. Focus group are a cost-effective way to collect data. Focus groups highlight diverse perspective. Interactions among participants enhance data quality. Silences and topics avoided are revealing. Analysis unfolds as the interview unfolds. Focus groups tend to be enjoyable to participants. And the limitations of focus group. Focus group, like all forms of data collection, also have limitations. The number of questions that can be asked is greatly restricted in the group setting. Available response time for any particular individual is restrained to hear from everyone. So a rule of thumb, with 8 people and an hour for the group, plan to ask no more than 10 major questions. Kasi abuti po kayo ng siyam-siyam dun sa mga that's your desired time. Beyond merely asking questions, facilitating and executing a focus group interview needs extensive group process expertise. The moderator must keep the interview moving so that 1 or 2 persons do not dominate and so that others who aren't very talkative may express themselves. So those who recognize their point of view is in the minority may hesitate now to speak up and raise adverse reactions. Focus group tends to operate best when the participants are strangers to one another, despite having similar backgrounds. Controversial and highly personal issues are poor topics for focus group. Confidentiality cannot be assured in focus group. So I would like to show minute lang po on conducting mediated and focus group. This video again was uploaded from YouTube. This is translated video. Kaya po isang tono lang yung boses niya, female voice, ang maririnig natin. Okay.
Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. On behalf of research company Zebra, I would like to welcome you in this web meeting. Today, we will have an open discussion about topical matters that affect us and interest us all. I hope you will enjoy our discussion. There are no strict rules. However, there are a couple of things that will facilitate our interaction. First of all, remember that in market research, there are no right or wrong answers. Any input is welcome, and it is natural and expected, actually, not to reach agreement on all issues. In fact, that is why we have invited to join us, so as to listen to as many voices as possible. So it is very important for me to listen to each one of you, but not at the same time. I know that sometimes we might get carried away and interrupt maybe our interlocutor. Please let us try to keep things under control and not create an atmosphere like a TV talk show where you have 4 pop-up windows with everyone shouting at the same time. Also, because this market research is particularly important, we have several people following our discussion and also some members of the team from abroad. And right now, our interpreter, Aliki, hi Aliki, is listening to us as she has to interpret simultaneously everything we say in English. If you all talk at the same time, Aliki will probably have to slit her wrists, and that would be a shame. So whoever is prone to speaking out of turn will be reminded by me that we have to listen to what the other members of the group have to say.
Okay. So kailangan ng introduction sa simula pa lang sasabihin na lang po ba? Kahit sa group, focus group discussion. Medyo mahaba po kasi konti yun, 17 minutes po yun. But you can download po dun sa YouTube na po. Okay, for the interest of time. So for the last step po, konti na lang po. So the first step is to gather and prepare the data for analysis. Depending on the data you've collected, you'll either need to transcribe it or scan it. Transcribing is converting speech to text word for word. So before you start transcribing, you first need to determine what transcription method you want. The best method depends on the goal of your transcription, because there are 3 types of transcription. Okay. So in the verbatim description, write down every word, including poses, emotional expressions like laughing, shattering, and hesitations like lahat ng sinabi niya, okay, sinusulat po yun. That's the verbatim transcription. This form of transcribing is most commonly utilized in the legal profession or research when you're interested in what's said and how it is stated. Then we have the intelligent verbatim. The intelligent verbatim transcription, which is the most common, write down every word but leave out unnecessary fillers such as yeah, you know, and so on. Tanggal na po lahat yun sa intelligent verbatim transcription. So to improve readability, you may also repair grammar problems, broken phrases, extended paragraphs. So this method is more readable than verbatim transcription. Okay, but some data is lost in the process, such as emotions, poses, and hesitation. So, kadalasan po, ito yung madalas namin ginagamit, the intelligent verbatim transcription. Okay, so sa example in transcript, there are no rules for formatting and structuring a transcript. However, most transcripts contain the following information: the names of the interviewer and interviewee. So, pwedeng just sa interviewee can be anonymized, date and time when the interviewee took place, location of the interview, speaker designation, who says what, line numbers, and time stamps. Okay, so pwedeng optional yan. So, pero kung gusto niyo lang, okay din lang. Okay, so I think that was my last slide. And I'd like to finish with this quotation by Werner von Braun. Research is what I'm doing when I don't know what I'm doing. And on that final note, that concludes my presentation. So this is the list of references I use in the presentations. Okay, so thank you very much for your interest and attention. Good morning po ulit.
There you go. Thank you so much, Professor Navidad, for that very comprehensive and compendious discussion about qualitative data collection techniques. Indeed, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Navidad is the prime example of a very holistic researcher who traverses both worlds of quantitative and qualitative research. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is your second sign to take a step forward in learning and embracing the art of qualitative methodologies in research. I hope that you, our dear colleagues, were able to jot down notes, because it's not every day that we get the opportunity to to sit in and listen to discussions that are as detailed as the one freshly delivered by Professor Navidad. Personally, my favorite takeaway from Professor Navidad's discussion was to encourage storytelling among your respondents, because at times these are actually the moments in the interview where we get to stumble upon valuable information that we did not expect to find in the first place. Indeed, this is a proof that qualitative research in the medical technology profession, especially in the Philippine setting, is a treasure trove of information just sitting by the doorstep waiting to be unraveled. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, Professor Florence Co. Navidad Edi, a warm virtual round of applause, please. Thank you so much, Professor Navidad, for gracing us with your presence this morning. So, at this point, dear colleagues, if you wish to ask questions, just drop them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Again, if you wish to ask questions, just drop them in the Q&A box at the bottom part of your screen. This is the part of the program where our speakers will be addressing your question. Time check is exactly 31 minutes past 11, and so therefore at this point the table is now yours for the open forum. I guess as of the moment we have one question for each of our participants, so one for Professor Hapan and one for Professor Navidad. Let's go first with the first question. So this is from this question, Professor Hapan, is from an anonymous attendee. The question goes this way: can we use this type of research in graduate school instead of the traditional experimental method?
I think it depends on the program that you are enrolled in. In my case, I was allowed to do 3 phenomenological studies and 1 sanguinary climax or mixed method research for my dissertation in PhD, because I'm enrolled in PhD in education, major in educational management. Also, it will depend on your institution whether such type of research, phenomenology, qualitative research will be allowed in your institution.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Hapan, for addressing that question. And this time around, for another for the question for Professor Navidad, is there a specific software used in order to analyze the transcripts from the interview with the respondents? And if there are, which ones can you suggest and why?
Yeah, so we usually use the MaxQDA, but you may opt to use also the NVivo. Okay, so they have the same principle, the MaxQDA NVivo. So yun lang, mas mura ang NVivo than the MaxQDA. But MaxQDA is more on the, if you want some of the graphs, you want the comparative aspects, correlational aspects, then you may use the MaxQDA. Yun po siya.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Navidad and Professor Hapan, for addressing the questions of our participants. Furthermore, we have here one feedback from one of our participants in the person of Mr. Jason Hidrosolio. He's one of our scholars now. He's doing research in Taiwan. So according to him, dear professors, thank you for a very informative set of lectures. Our colleagues in the academe are the ones more exposed to research opportunities. As we know that research competency is one of the pillars of being university. However, I think our colleagues in the hospital practice or freestanding labs have a different story. So in the goal to develop research competencies in our profession, how would you encourage, or what do you think is the best motivation for practicing medtechs in order to integrate our research in their careers, especially in the utilization of qualitative research? So we would love to hear answers from both Professor Hapan and Professor Navidad regarding this matter. Who would like to go first?
May I go first?
Okay, sige po, carry on.
All right. So, of course, we should acknowledge the fact that there's a mine of data, research data available in the clinical setting, in the clinical laboratories. That's why first we are doing this free webinars discussing about research to encourage our MedTech practitioners to also engage in research, and a strategy that could best realize research engagement, especially among clinical laboratory practitioners, would be a collaboration between those practicing in the clinical laboratory and those coming from the academe. It will be a marriage of practice and academe, and I think it would be a really very beautiful story if we will be able to do that.
Amen to that. What a very beautiful choice of words once again from Professor Hapan. A marriage of research specialties from the academe and from the practice. What a beautiful a product that would come up in the future. So at this point, I would like also to entertain the answer from Professor Navidad regarding this question.
Okay, so in addition with Dr. Hapan, so I think in doing research like this, the qualitative aspects, okay, in the clinical setting, you may improve your personal growth, and not only personal but also your professional growth. Okay, in terms of the settings, the venue, and of course your practice as a medical technologist.
Okay, there you go. And thank you so much, Professor Navidad and Professor Hapan. And that, ladies and gentlemen, wraps up our open forum for this morning session. So at this point, without further ado, we move on to the presentation of certificates for our speaker in this morning's webinar. As I read the citations, may I request our speakers to open their cameras for the photo documentation. So as of the moment, okay, the certificate read as follows. The Philippine Association of Medical Technologies Incorporated, the only PRC accredited professional organization for Filipino medical technologists, presents this certificate of appreciation to Professor Maria Frida Z. Hapan, RMT, PhD, as resource speaker on the topic entitled Not Everything That Counts Can Be Counted, Application of Qualitative Research in Medical Technology and Medical Laboratory Science, held virtually on August 6, 2022. Signed by Mr. Mark Raymond G. Nava, RMT, MPA, MSMT, the PAMIT National Executive Secretary, and our beloved PAMIT National President, Mr. Romel F. Saceda, RMT, MBA. Congratulations, Professor Hapan.
Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome po. So at this point, let's pose for a picture. May I request as well the documentations committee to assist us with the document with the photo op. Okay. Okay, in 3, 2, 1, smile. Okay, for a while po. Okay, thank you so much once again, and congratulations, Professor Hapan. So at this point, we move on to the presentation of certificate for Professor Florence C. Navidad, RMT, PhD, for serving as a research speaker on the topic entitled Qualitative Research Methods, Data Collection. So at this moment, let's pose for a photo op. Give us a while. Okay, in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, smile. Okay, thank you so much, and congratulations, Professor Navidad. Okay, you're welcome po. And now, ladies and gentlemen, to formally conclude our fruitful program for this morning, allow me to call on our beloved PAMIT President, Mr. Romel Saceda. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm virtual round of applause, please. Hello there, President Romel. Good morning.
Hello, good morning to all of you. I'd like to thank the organizers, the Committee on Development and Leadership, and headed by Dr. Manawis, Thank you also to all our speakers for sharing their knowledge, Dr. Hapan and Dr. Navidad. Um, Even though I'm out of the country, you still consider me to give these closing remarks. And I thank you because for me as a medical technologist, doing research should be part of our responsibility to help contribute to the progress of our profession. In our ever-expanding world, we learn new things every day. According to the internet, examination into and a study of materials and sources to establish facts and reach new conclusions. Today's information shape us. However, scrutiny of this learned information is required to distinguish between real and fraudulent. In varying degrees, a wide range of experiments and observations are conducted. These sets ensures that the learned information is more than simply a theory. Explain this. According to the National Library of Medicine, qualitative research is becoming more prominent in medicine and healthcare. Recently, editorials advocating a more significant role for qualitative research for address both clinical and psychosocial phenomena have appeared in. And for example, Journal of General Medicine, increasing numbers of reports from qualitative studies have begun to appear in these and other prominent journals. I hope soon one of our members will publish the research here. My dear colleagues, medical technology is not simply laboratory and administrative work. To achieve our organizational goal of international recognition, we must also research to advance our vocation policy, practices, procedures, and technology that can help cope with the current situation. Let us challenge ourselves to conduct what it is suitable for our institution and ask contribute to our nation's progress. For again, I'd also like to thank all family members for attending. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
And there you go. Thank you so much, President Romel, for that very inspirational message sent with love from abroad. What a lovely way to conclude our program for this for this Saturday morning. At the same time, I would like to take this moment to extend our gratitude for providing us with this platform to learn something new in the field of research. We look forward for more opportunities to grow with PAMET in the future. At the same time, I would also like to take this moment to extend our gratitude to the support of Sir Edison, the chair of the CPD committee, and Sir Ollie for the technical assistance. Thank you so much, Sir Ed and Sir Ollie. May the force be with you. And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes our qualitative research for medical technology professionals in the clinical laboratory webinar this morning. However, no certificates of participation will be issued to those participants who were not able to fill up the evaluation form. Again, no certificate of participation will be issued to those participants who were not able to fill up the evaluation form. Therefore, before we release our evaluation link, may I request everyone to open their cameras and flash their brightest smiles for today's photo op. So I guess no, a lot of you, baka no, meron pang mga hindi nakapaghilamos. So I'll be giving you at least at least 10, 10 seconds to retouch. Ladies and gentlemen, retouch in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let me see who among our participants are already good to go for the photo op. Tingnan natin for a while, huh? Oh. Okay. So at this moment, may I request the assistance of our documentations committee for our photo op. Ilang panels po ba meron tayo? Okay. So hello there. Good to see our colleagues. Disabled ba ang cam? Oh, okay. So, may lusot yung mga participants natin na kakagising lang. Ang mga hindi pa nakapagilamos. Anywho, so we will still be taking our picture for this morning. So, kahit yung mga DP nyo lang nalalagay dyan. Okay, in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ladies and gentlemen, say cheese. Okay, great. Thank you so much. And that would be all. Thank you so much. Once again, this is Clive Ivan Mercado, your host for this morning's event, signing off. God bless you and may the force be with you all. Have a great August ahead of you, dear colleagues. Bye. Enjoy your weekend. The evaluation link will be posted in the chat box, and then the QR code also will be projected in your screen, so you'll be given an hour to fill it up. Okay, again, the evaluation link will be posted shortly by the tech the tech team in the chat box, and at the same time, the QR code will be projected in the slide as of the moment. So you'll be given an hour to fill it up. That would be all. Thank you so much. Stay safe and dry. Bye. Oh, there you go.
Thank you, Sir Clive. Thank you, Dr. Hapan, Dr. Navidad. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Dr. Robert.
Maganda. Maraming salamat. Sir Oli, thank you very much for always.
Thank you, Doc Oli. Thank you, Sir Clive.
Thank you for everyone. Have a happy weekend.
Mr. Clive, grabe po yung buhay. Thank you po. Thank you, Dr. Nawis. Thank you, Sir Oli.
The MC for all seasons. Fortified with energy.
Grabe nga.